In the quiet of our shared life, I stumbled upon a truth that shattered the foundation of what I believed was a faithful marriage. Alice, the heart of my world, veiled her secret rendezvous beneath a facade of normalcy. "It's just work," she whispered, her voice a melody of lies. I, too naive or too trusting, failed to see the signs until a misplaced letter revealed a mosaic of deceit. This is my awakening to reality. Enjoy watching it. I discovered that the most essential thing in life is to have dependable individuals around you who can assist. I was unlucky and discovered that my wife had cheated on me entirely by mistake, and I had to make a difficult but critical decision that would shape the rest of my life. My wife Alice tried to control her emotions as we walked across campus, leaving our youngest son's dorm room after just helping him settle in. Alice and our neighbor Megan, whose son shared a room with ours, were both in tears. "It's surreal to see our boys all grown up," Megan said, grabbing for a tissue from her purse. Alice accepted one of the tissues given. "It's incredibly difficult to understand," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "They are now responsible for making several decisions." As we approached the parking lot, my mind was preoccupied with my meaning and conclusion. Doubts crept in. Should I make the final call after over 10 years of planning? I began to question the timing and necessity of the entire process. Alice grabbed for my hand, but I avoided her move by taking the car keys from my pocket. Though we were still some ways from my SUV, I observed our neighbor Megan casting a puzzled look my way. "It's okay, David," Alice reassured me. "I understand how you feel. If only you really did." I considered my ideas, recalling the critical event that set everything in action. Alice and I had recently celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, and it happened to be election year. During that period, politicians running for office accused one another of being bigger thieves and liars. I couldn't help but wonder, when these unscrupulous politicians died, would they require a grave to be buried in, or would they just screw into the ground? That afternoon, I checked the mail and was happy to discover a padded envelope amid the usual junk mail and invoices. I won a bid on eBay for a set of SD cards, and the delivery was long delayed. My excitement quickly changed to sadness when I opened the padded envelope to see another huge manila envelope inside. "Damn," I exclaimed as I opened the attached letter. I hoped this bid wasn't a hoax that had spoiled my day. Little did I know, my current day, as well as many future days, were about to be devastated. "Hello, Alice. I hope this mail finds you well. I recently admitted to my battle with alcoholism and have begun working through it with the help of my higher power and sponsor. I am now glad to state that I have been clean and sober for 90 days. As part of my rehabilitation journey, I am taking steps to make amends to individuals I have mistreated. Regarding our previous exchanges, I'm ready to put things right, but I'm unsure of the proper method. Only now, in my newfound sobriety, can I fully see the consequences of our acts, and I want to express my heartfelt regret without giving you any extra grief. Though it is a difficult decision, I must respectfully seek your forgiveness. If you prefer, I will respect your wishes and refrain from making future contact. Please do as you see fit with the enclosed things. I lack the strength to toss them, but I know that holding on to them just reinforces the temptation and memories they symbolize. With kind regards, Carl," I yelled with surprise. "What the hell?" I turned the now torn padded envelope over to check the front. It became clear that it was addressed to my wife, Alice. "Does Carl regret our actions?" I muttered aloud, perplexed. "What actions?" I just knew Carl as a former neighbor who had relocated some time ago. Carl was one of those people who appeared to be aimless, living in his parents' basement and frequently getting drunk. He claimed to own a photography business. Carl was a decade older than both Alice and me. He was what we affectionately called a slinky, not especially useful for anything, but could provoke a chuckle while tumbling downstairs. I recall Carl being forced to depart the premises following his parents' death, failure to pay property taxes, or other such obligations. My thoughts were disorganized, and it took me a moment to realize I was still holding the smaller manila envelope. Pushing aside the padded envelope and letter, I eagerly ripped into the big manila package. A cascade of 3.5 photographs poured out on the table. Among them were other photographs of Alice, looking a decade younger in provocative poses. She was dressed in a clinging top and shorts, which reminded me of something from the past. Flipping over one of the photos, I saw there was no date. Stepping into my home office, I selected a framed picture from the collection of family images on my desk. It featured Alice sitting with our first kid, taken when he was less than 1 year old. Alice had given me this photograph for Christmas. She donned the same as in the freshly arrived images. Even the lighting was strikingly similar to the photos I held in my hand. Turning over the framed photo, I noticed it was from 9 years ago. Finally, I had a timeline to link with the enigmatic photos. I browsed through the photos, following Alice's transition from coy postures to bearing it all. With each layer of clothes removed, my heart rate skyrocketed. The final set featured Alice engaging in explicit actions, in stark contrast to her innocent beginning. Some photos appeared to be staged by the person behind the camera, with tilted viewpoints capturing Alice's humorous stare. 2 additional candid viewpoints revealed personal situations. Others were less controlled, possibly captured remotely or with a tripod, as seen by their off-center composition and slightly blurred focus. Collapsing onto my desk chair, a rush of dizziness washed over me, like if all the blood had left my head. How long had Alice been unfaithful? I permitted myself to look around at the collage of images on my desk depicting my family. I tried to see if any more of them had Carl's stamp. The assortment represented the evolution of my family. There was Alice at our wedding, Alice with my eldest son when he was a baby, then with both of our boys as they grew up. Except for the first photo, all of the others were the logos of various male photo studios. Suddenly, a terrifying thought entered my head: what if the boys aren't mine? I took the most current snapshot of my beloved wife and our 2 sons. They wore summer league baseball clothes. When I looked at my children, I felt the same sense of pride that every father does. Nonetheless, I attempted to take a more critical stance. While both boys had their mother Alice's facial traits, they appeared to inherit my body and jawline. I reclined in my chair, exhaustion overcoming me. This was not helpful at all. Then, a startling thought hit me, prompting me to go through the desk drawers. Among the contents, I discovered medical paperwork filled by my sons for the forthcoming baseball season. Back in my day, such papers just had emergency contact information. Nowadays, it was about 6 pages long, covering food allergies, insurance information, waivers, prescription, and consent paperwork. It struck me how the paperwork for my children's baseball league seemed to exceed the huge loss of the treaty that ended World War II, which could fit on a single sheet of paper. After some searching, I found the information I was looking for in the comprehensive form the blood types filled out by our family physician. I confirmed my blood type after taking out my Red Cross blood donor card from my wallet. Alice had the same blood type. We frequently laughed about the convenience of being able to donate to one another. Relief washed over me when I realized that my oldest son likewise had type O blood, according to his form. With bated breath, I scanned my young son's form for his blood type information. The blood type proudly declared itself a positive in large black letters. Even without a medical degree, a beginner high school biology student understands that 2 people with type O blood cannot have a child with type A blood. I had assumed that my world couldn't fracture twice in 1 hour, yet it had. I stared at the words "a positive" on the screen for what seemed like an eternity, yearning desperately for them to change. However, they stayed unchanged. "You're a cheating woman," I screamed into the empty home, beating my fist against the desk. My mind was racing with confused thoughts. Should I end Alice's life? No. I should leave Alice. Perhaps murder and then departure? No. Simply take the boys and escape from Alice. My sons were 9 and 11. I suspected that if questioned, they would support their father in a divorce. Or would they? Did they have a choice? These mental acrobatics lasted an hour, leaving me exhausted and without solutions. Drowning in more bizarre incidents, early tiredness overcame me, and I stumbled up the stairs before collapsing into bed. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, admiring my wife's back as she washed herself at the sink. I had skipped dinner the night before, and when she and the boys returned from the movies, after a difficult night's sleep, I felt strangely calm, almost numb. Nothing had changed inside the house. Alice looked the same as before, but it felt as if someone had disclosed all of the magician's tricks to me. I was no longer in awe. Instead, I studied all of her actions and intentions. Do you remember Tom? I inquired. Though I couldn't see her face, Alice's body stiffened briefly before responding. Tom? Our old neighbor. Tom? She remarked. It's been ages since I heard that name. I was just thinking about Tom and his photography interest. He was frequently taking photos of the neighborhood kids. Do you think he might be a criminal or something? Alice chuckled, expressing relief. Trust me, David, Tom was not interested in children. And how are you so sure? I trailed off. Alice cleaned her hands with a dishcloth before summoning the boys to breakfast. Many mid-mornings, I noticed Tom, apparently hungover, attempting to surreptitiously take a woman out of their basement without his parents noticing. You seem to be familiar with Tom's shenanigans, I commented. Do you miss him? Not really, Alice responded. We got lucky when Megan moved in. Our children are basically inseparable now. Tom's bank foreclosed on a single mother, so Megan, our lovely neighbor, took over the mortgage on the house. She used her late police officer husband's life insurance money to purchase Tom's former home, which had children of similar ages. Ours and Megan's quickly became close friends. As she worked long hours as a single parent, we essentially adopted her children. It was just as easy to take two kids to a baseball game or the beach because they kept each other engaged. Alice often taunted Megan about claiming her children as dependents on our tax returns. As a single mother, Megan lacked the necessary skills to perform basic household maintenance. Alice playfully nicknamed me a house husband, but I wasn't quite ready to star in this old house. I was adept in the most basic house maintenance activities. My father, a competent craftsman, frequently joked, if it can't be fixed with a hammer, it's an electrical problem. I didn't mind helping out at Megan's apartment. She was gorgeous and a genuine MILF. Megan never made any attempts toward me, and I also did not express any interest. My father stressed the importance of honoring our pledges, and I kept mine. Alice approached me and gently slapped my shoulder in jest. David, don't tell me you are still jealous of Tom after all this time. The guilty conscience speaks first, Alice. Do I have any reason to be jealous? Alice took a seat at the table and avoided eye contact while stirring her coffee. Of course not, she responded. Tom was a harmless alcoholic who was constantly taking photos of everything. He might have been a good photographer if he hadn't been drinking so much. I rested in my chair silently. Alice took a fleeting peek up from her coffee mug before continuing. Seriously, David, we had only just begun. You were working 2 jobs and taking classes while I stayed at home with our baby all day. After watching Barney for 10 hours and changing diapers, I desired adult connection. Everyone in the neighborhood was busy. Tom was simple. Well, he was present. I stayed mute. Alice's frustration grew. For heaven's sake, David, do you really think I was out having relationships with some middle-aged alcoholic while the baby was sleeping? Stop being so self-absorbed. I placed aside my coffee mug. Alice, you appear uneasy. They say that the best defense is a good offense. Do you have anything to share with me? Alice's countenance became hostile, and she abruptly stood up from the table. Our chat was interrupted by the lad's loud entry into the kitchen. I silently stood up from my seat and made my way upstairs. I abandoned any hopes of reconciliation. While I thought my rage at Alice would subside, I knew that once shattered, trust could never be completely regained. Are you positive you'll go through with this? I questioned my brother Brian the next day in his office as he went through the photos, letters, and other documentation I had brought him. Brian, my brother from another set of parents, is from Eastern Europe, where his parents fled during the Cold War. They lived next to us throughout my upbringing. Brian tragically lost his parents in an accident when we were just 6 years old. A social worker initially handed Brian's care to my family as a temporary arrangement while they looked for other relatives or foster care. However, Brian ended up staying with us since his case appeared to fall between the gaps or become lost in the bureaucratic churn. During those early days, I didn't realize the importance of Brian's presence. I treated it as an extended visit. It wasn't until later that I recognized the financial pressure this put on our working-class family. When I later asked my mother how we managed, she simply shrugged and said, "We tighten our belts a little and stretch the soup with more water." My father was always willing to aid anyone in need. Despite being religious, he believed that faith should be proved through actions rather than recitations. and he had little regard for organized religion. At the conclusion of our meal prayers, Dad would always say, "May there be more around the table next time, and protect us from your followers, Lord." Dad treated Brian much like he did me and my brothers, which, given Dad's fury, may be good or harmful. When I asked Dad why he took on another mouth to feed when we were already struggling, he just shrugged and answered, "That's what a man does." Brian had exceptionally fair blonde hair reflecting his Eastern European origin, but I had darker skin due to our parents' Southern Italian background. It typically aroused eyebrows when we identified ourselves as brothers. At a father-son gathering with my dad and Brian, someone mentioned that the mother must have really pale skin. My father said, "Yeah, she's translucent." Brian studied tirelessly at the law faculty and graduated with a higher education. A famous law firm was looking for him, and he was rapidly progressing toward partnership. Despite the fact that Brian worked over 80 hours per week, he embodied the image of an aspiring lawyer. He owned a fancy car, an apartment with a view of the city, and a wealthy spouse of breathtaking beauty who accompanied him to high-profile events. However, Brian's world was turned upside down when his fiancée cheated on him with his partner in the office. Despite the treachery, Brian remained with the company until the end of the year to receive incentives and benefits. He then arranged for the departure of top lawyers and big clients from the firm. This enormous exodus finally led to the demise of his former employer, which survived several years until declaring bankruptcy. Brian now ran a small law firm focusing on contracts, wills, and other legal issues. However, the majority of his income came from functioning as outside counsel in significant trials. We remained close, even though we were married and had 2 children. While going through my paperwork, Brian said, "David, I believe you are still reeling from the shock." I said sarcastically, "Take some time to gain perspective, like you did. You are my personal hero for how you handled the event at your former legal company." "Not everybody can be a hero," Brian responded, attempting to infuse humor. "Some of us must sit on the sidelines and applaud as the parade passes by." He then became serious. "Listen, David, your wife Alice is someone most people find difficult to see beyond themselves. We tend to focus on how we are treated and ignore the consequences of our actions on others. Are you attempting to channel Yoda now?" I exhaled. "I want out of this disaster. My retaliation will be to ensure that the cheating woman receives nothing and that everyone is aware of what she did. I'm not going to allow a woman to think she can play games with me and then use hormones as an excuse to treat me like an idiot." "All right, David. However, remember that wanting vengeance simply grants someone control over you. It demonstrates their ability to have a significant impact on you. Do not give them that delight. It's preferable to ignore the emotional hurt. I understand that it is not instantly satisfying, but it is the better method in the long run. Believe me, I've been there." Brian looked at his computer keyboard. "I do not specialize in family law. However, I know a guy from my previous practice who is a true shark. They call him Mr. Big Shot because he always deploys heavy artillery. This guy doesn't play around. Are you in? Are you sure you want to go this route? Go ahead and make the call, Brian." A week later, we found ourselves in a nice corner office downtown. Mr. Big Shot had just completed reading the large stack of paperwork I had brought in, including tax records, pay stubs, mortgage payments, paternity tests, wills, and so on. The list appeared never-ending. Mr. Big Shot took off his reading spectacles before speaking. "Let it go." I was caught aback by these statements from the intimidating lawyer known for his aggressive approach. "David, I understand there is a relationship between you and Brian, so we'll be honest. Let it go." It took me a time to reply. "You mean I should just pretend nothing happened, smile, and tolerate being taken advantage of?" Mr. Big Shot reclined in his chair. "Exactly. Unless you have video evidence that your wife Alice force-fed your children Red Bull as toddlers and organized fights for profit." He made a motion towards me. "You currently have a beautiful wife, a home, and 2 great children. But with a little more effort, you may end up with a small apartment, no money, part-time custody of the kids, and your wife entertaining new male friends while you pay the bills. I'm talking about alimony, child support, and devoting more than half of your wages to savings." I was taken aback. "Alice holds a job, and why should I pay child support for a child who isn't my own?" Mr. Big Shot seemed amused. "David, I will gladly accept your money if you insist, but allow me to educate you on the realities and the legislation. Whatever your wife makes from that small part-time job at the hair salon is nothing compared to your income. Therefore, alimony is inevitable. Only the amount and length are up for dispute. In terms of child support for a non-biological child, only 6 states in America allow a male parent to stop or avoid paying child support for a child who is not biologically his but was born during the couple's marriage. Unfortunately, we do not live in one of these states. What if I find out that Alice knew all along that it wasn't my son? Wouldn't this be called fraud? Mr. Big Shot leaned in and rested his forearms on the enormous desk. Allow me to share a little secret with you. Assume we can prove that your wife knew the child wasn't yours, but still represented him as yours. That would technically be fraudulent. However, it is a unique type of fraud that has no consequences and demands no return. Even if your wife revealed in a full-page ad in the New York Times that you are not the father, she is under no legal responsibility to reimburse you or suffer any consequences in all 50 states. Remember the unfortunate man in Florida who was paying child support to a lady he was not even married to? He ultimately received a DNA test that proved the child was not his. Nonetheless, the court ordered him to pay support, arguing it was in the best interests of the child. The case is most likely still pending in the courts, and by the time it is finalized, the child will have turned 18. Even if he wins, he won't get any of his money back. Can I try to recoup some of the money from my wife's unfaithful boyfriend? Most states allow only the mother to seek reparation. Only 2 states enable you, as a male, to attempt to reclaim funds. However, you must show that both the boyfriend and the mother were aware of the deceit. In addition, you must demonstrate that there was a considerable detrimental impact on the child's well-being and family life. And David, guess what? Unfortunately, our state lacks such a statute. I reclined in my chair as he proceeded to speak. Consider whether surrendering a man's pride is worth more than half of his assets, including spousal and child support. Money cannot buy back his self-esteem or restore his reputation. Is it better to stop things and take a chance on meeting someone who actually appreciates him than to suffer through a loveless marriage? Brian interjected, proposing that a marriage counselor could help them overcome these obstacles. Mr. Big Shot dismissed the suggestion with a wave of his hand. Counseling is helpful in fewer than 10% of situations. In my experience, it frequently warns the spouse, allowing them time to organize an exit strategy. More than 2/3 of women who attend therapy end up filing for divorce. Furthermore, more than 55% of women who cheat eventually leave their marriage, while the odds are slightly higher in jurisdictions with shared custody rules. Unfortunately, we don't live in one of those states. Our system is more of a winner-take-all scenario. The odds are strongly in favor of the mother in this case. How old are you? In your mid-30s? Yeah, I said, attempting to withstand the assault of emotional strikes. David, I regret to inform you that statistically, the most usual age for a wife to cheat on her partner is 45. If your partner has already been unfaithful, the risk that they will do so again climbs dramatically as they enter their 40s. The initial agony and shame from the prior indiscretion may have subsided, but recollections of what made it wonderful or exciting tend to stay and magnify over time. It's similar to a high school player who scored the winning point but had an injury in the process. The mind tends to minimize the pain while exaggerating the value of the accomplishment. The need to relive that moment can become compulsive. Whereas a middle-aged athlete may only be able to remember their children's sporting activities, a spouse may seek out extramarital connections in an attempt to rekindle the spark that began the affair. Brian expressed what everyone had been thinking: a cheater who has cheated before will continue to cheat. Mr. Big Shot extended his hands, palms facing upward. Nothing is absolute, but infidelity is on par with money as the second most common cause of divorce. I refuse to let it happen to me, I said between clenched teeth. You can swear all you want, David, Mr. Big Shot said. Swearing is the intermediate step between fleeing and fighting. Damn it, I said quietly. Is staying together more economical? Mr. Big Shot mused. Extramarital affairs cause concern for 68% of married couples. When children are present, the situation becomes more complex. Children with divorced parents are more likely to experience substance misuse, promiscuity, despair, and aggression disorders. In a divorce, there are no clear winners. Children are always the ones that suffer the most. I suddenly remembered my chat with my father when we found out we were expecting a child. David, Dad once observed, many men become fathers, but not all fathers embody true manhood. A real man places his children above all else. If there isn't enough food, he becomes hungry. If there isn't adequate shelter, he braves the cold. If there isn't enough money, he goes without. Strength is critical. You must be unwavering in your support for your family, not only putting up a show of strength, but also resilient enough to seek and accept assistance when necessary. You won't fully appreciate your strength until it's all you have, son. You may frequently make mistakes, but you must never lose faith in your beliefs. This is a fundamental characteristic of authentic masculinity. Your efforts may go unnoticed or even mocked. However, a true man does not want recognition. He works for the well-being of his family and children, demonstrating true manhood. I leapt from my seat and reached out to Mr. Big Shot. I want to express my gratitude for all of your insights. I've acquired a wealth of legal information. However, I don't suppose you'll need assistance at this moment. What amount do I owe you for your time? Mr. Big Shot smiled as he leaned in for a handshake. No charge, David. Just two old legal mates chatting. He turned to my brother Brian. Plus, I owe your brother a lot for getting me out of a rut at our old firm. I am doing much better now thanks to him. Please feel free to contact us at any time. My door is always open for you both. I mean it. As we drove back in Brian's car, I questioned him. Why didn't you quit right after you met your fiancée through a mentor? Why did you work for this company for nearly a year? Brian's jaw tensed before he spoke. My first inclination was to quit immediately. He chuckled gently. Actually, it was my second impulse. My first wish was to tell the old scoundrel everything I believed after I hauled him away from my fiancée. Brian halted to change the radio station. As soon as I left him lying with her, I rushed to my office and composed my resignation letter. Why didn't you turn him in? I was upset with Tom. Then I started to feel terrible for myself. Then I remembered my father's comments about self-pity, and we recited them while imitating his voice. Boys, you can feel sorry for yourself all you want, but it will lead to nothing. Let me know when you're finished, and maybe we can talk. We laughed together before Brian proceeded. Anyway, I knew that there was no need for me to let the conduct of these two people indicate that I was entitled to a reward for my hard work. The following day, something unprecedented occurred. The most senior partner paid me a visit. He expressed sympathy for the disagreement between me and my former mentor. What crap. I made a substantial contribution to the company's operations, and he was only concerned that I would leave with valuable bills and compensated hours of work. He made several promises to me, but I insisted on everything being in writing. From that point forward, I was resolved not to let anyone control my happiness. I even kept this woman with me for a few enjoyable meetings. Why not? We're not inexperienced or unfamiliar with one another. She fled the instant I found something better. It's the same with the legal firm. I quit there on the same day that my contract terminated. I internalized my brother's suggestion. Since then, I've emphasized my personal pleasure while being true to my father's idea that our children come first. Alice slipped into obscurity in my eyes. I decided to limit my interactions with her as much as possible. This became much easier a week after I met with Mr. Big Shot. David, I have some fantastic news. Alice exclaimed at supper. The salon offered me a full-time management post. They'll have to work evenings and weekends at first, but I'm convinced you and the boys will be able to prepare your own meals for the time being. This layout worked perfectly. I left for work before Alice awoke, and when I got home, she was already at her job as a salon manager. By the time she finished work, I was fast asleep. On her days off, I informed Alice that I was participating in a darts league. In actuality, I chose to attend a couple of sessions with a therapist on my own. I discovered I wasn't much more messed up than the ordinary person. But more importantly, I realized that in addition to my responsibilities to my children, I was also accountable for my personal pleasure. What Alice had done or would do was beyond my control. We are continually confronted with temptations, and it is our own weakness and duty to submit to them. To be honest, my sentiments for Alice altered as soon as I lost trust in her. Eventually, I stopped caring about her acts. While the initial intensity of my resentment for her conduct diminished with time, the bad feelings persisted. My full emphasis was on my children. Alice became more of a roommate with benefits. She was so caught up in her work that I doubt she even noticed. Meanwhile, the lads and I were having a great time. I obtained a big home equity loan and utilized it to build a swimming pool, an outside deck, as well as to remodel our basement into the perfect man cave. I swapped in my ordinary car for a big SUV with awful gas mileage and prime seat season tickets to every sporting event. My boys, Megan's children, and I rode in style in my SUV, functioning as the team chauffeur. I could comfortably accommodate the entire squad and all of their gear. Whether we won or lost, we celebrated with trips to the local pizza parlor or ice cream shop, which I paid for. Megan regularly joined us on our outings, and many people mistook us for a large family. I wish. Every time I joked, Megan gave me a perplexed look. Alice routinely denied invitations, citing weariness from her demanding work schedule or a desire to relax on her days off. Eventually, the boys stopped asking. Several years later, my eldest son and Megan's firstborn attended the same college, with the latter earning a partial scholarship. Megan was unaware that I had funded her son's remaining expenditures. 3 years later, the same circumstance occurred with our last children. We are now brought to the present moment, and here is my present dilemma: should I stay or go? Should I accept change or cling to my current situation? Alice sat on our outdoor terrace, enjoying the last minutes of summer, holding a wine glass and gazing out over the pool. I returned after emptying away the debris of our vacation from the SUV and sat in a lounge chair opposite her. Alice kept her eyes closed. "David, the house feels so empty now that the boys have left," Alice murmured, taking another sip of her wine. "It's a big adjustment, but I'm ready for something fresh." After making my decision, I secretly thought, "Just you wait, honey. Change is on the way." I put the papers on the glass table between us. "Alice, I do not believe we should continue to be together. I want a divorce." Alice jumped upright from her seat and grabbed the papers, quickly perusing them. "What is this nonsense, David?" "Alice, these are only copies of the divorce petition. Once you have a lawyer, my attorney will send them the official documents. I have been fair. You can notice the savings." "Are you out of your mind?" Alice almost yelled. "After 20 years, you are abandoning me now? After everything we've gone through?" She proceeded to peruse the papers. "There is no alimony. Where is the split of savings? Debt from a shared residence? What are you aiming to accomplish?" I tried to remain composed. "Our wages are equivalent, and we have similar sums saved for retirement." That assertion was genuine because I had declined any raises associated with my recent promotions and had reduced my contributions to the 401k. I used it to finance my son's education expenditures. Alice appeared astonished, constantly flipping over documents. "Our salaries are only equal because I work twice as many hours as you. I am not selling my house. I put too much work into it. Alice, considering the home equity loan, we are underwater on the house. Where do you believe the money for this debt came from? Your new kitchen?" She slapped the papers on the table. "We are not divorcing. That concludes things." Suddenly, her thoughts appeared to light up. "You nasty creature." Alice spat and jabbed her finger at me. "Did you find someone else? I gave you the best of my life, and now you want to leave me for a younger female?" Her face reddened with rage. "How long have you betrayed me, you deceitful swine?" "Please," I sighed. "Let's not get into that. It does not matter why. This is a fault-free state. Everything, assets and obligations, will be divided equitably." But Alice was far from satisfied. "You're mistaken, mister. It matters. I want to know, and I deserve to know. Who were you cheating on me with?" I shook my head, speaking softly. "Yes, there was infidelity. But please do not linger on it. It's best that we just..." When she tossed her wine glass at me, my eyesight clouded for a second, and water flooded my face. As I stood up and proceeded to the kitchen, I felt the glass ricochet off my back and hit the floor. Alice, enraged, followed me on my heels, continuing her verbal attacks. While I washed my face in the sink, she shouted, "You pathetic cheater! You cannot simply leave me because you want to have fun with another female. No wonder our connection has worsened in recent years. Okay, Let me tell you something, gentlemen. I've had numerous opportunities in the past, but I never took advantage of them. Alice's rant came to a sudden halt as I turned around and meticulously arranged images of her and Tom engaging in sexual activities on the kitchen table. With every new photo I posted, her expression of shock became more intense. She became pale and hurried to the sink, battling nausea. I browsed through the images and sat at the kitchen table. Alice, it appears that you took full use of previous opportunities. Alice eventually finished vomiting, washed her mouth with tap water, splashed her face, and wiped it with a towel before joining me at the table. Please, David, put those away. Alice pushed the stack of images towards me with one finger, handling them like a dangerous snake. I put the photos in an envelope and tossed them into a drawer behind me. Alice buried her face in her hands. My God, I'm not sure what to say. I was tired, Alice. It doesn't really matter. I do not care. Alice reached for my arm. David, please listen. It was only one time. You must trust me on this. No, Alice. I do not have to believe you on this, and I will not. I slumped back in my chair. I mean, what? You'd never lie about cheating? Alice clutched my arm more tightly. It seems like decades ago now. I never realized how difficult becoming a mother would be. I was continuously sleep-deprived while caring for the infant, and you were fatigued from work. I felt as though I was losing myself, simply being another mom for you. I moved my arm away. I was working 2 jobs and studying for the sake of my family, so I don't want to hear about tiredness. David, I understand, Alice begged. I wish I could undo everything. Tom was simply a fun drunk. His mother would occasionally come to watch the baby for a few minutes, allowing me to spend some time with adults and keep my sanity. I tried to stand up. Alice, I honestly don't care. Ignoring me, she proceeded. Tom was usually holding a drink, and I would eventually take a sip or two. He enjoyed snapping photos of me with his high-speed shutter camera. I began joking around, saying it was a major modeling shoot. Tom encouraged me, telling me how good I looked. The camera loves me. Alice bit her lip and met my gaze. It was just harmless fun that got out of control. I thought I couldn't be more startled than when I viewed the images, but that wasn't true. You mean you had pleasure with that damn drunk when my son was napping a few steps from you? I mumbled. My God, David, I am so ashamed. I am not sure what came over me. I was like that such a girl of easy virtue, I recommended. Wait, I take it back. You traded your marriage for a photograph. Alice sobbed and lowered her head to the table. I mentally berated myself. I would not treat a stranger in this manner, let alone someone I previously cared strongly for. Alice, we cannot change the past, but we can take responsibility for our actions. Please sign these papers. We'll just say we drifted apart. Nobody outside our immediate family needs to know. David, urged Alice, raising her tear-stained face from the table, it does not have to be like this. Please, that happened so long ago. It was insignificant and only a blip, a useless error with no lasting consequences. I took another set of documents from the folder and placed them in front of Alice, who scanned over them. Alice, every action has repercussions. Some are more crucial than others. What is this, David? Alice inquired, scanning the charts and graphs scattered throughout the pages. These are our family's DNA test results and blood types. As you can see, one of us does not match, I explained. Alice gripped her chest and gasped for air. I hurriedly retrieved a paper bag from the kitchen closet. Breathe into this, I urged, placing the bag in her shaky hands. You're hyperventilating. Just slow down, take in natural breaths through your nose. It's easy. Alice's breathing returned to normal after about a minute. I returned to my seat at the table as she placed the paper bag down, her color gradually returning. Alice, did you know all along? I stated, more of an observation than a question. Alice started shaking her head, twisting the paper bag in her hands. I see. I had my suspicions, but I remained hopeful. I prayed, but I never really knew for sure, her words faltered. Alice, please, I urged. You graduated from high school with honors in biology, if I recall correctly. You must have thought I was a fool when I believed in the concept of premature birth and babies arriving early. Nonsense you fed me. Can you blame me for doubting anything you say? You not only deceived me, but you forced me to raise another man's child. It was not like that, David, Alice protested. After Tom and me, I felt so humiliated. I couldn't tolerate anyone's touch, not even yours. I told myself that I'd be the best mother and wife, but when I discovered I was pregnant, I panicked. I had nightmares about you abandoning me, taking our son, and forcing me to do something horrific. Alice, have I ever threatened you during our time together? Did I ever force you to do something against your will? You understand how much family matters to me, how I was reared. I halted, rubbing my temples. If you'd come to me, we could have worked things out. Instead, you chose to lie. It was only one lie, David, Alice claimed. No, Alice, it wasn't a single lie. That was a lie every day till now. Every day you decided to live and spread a lie. Alice claimed that she had no option. You always had a choice, Alice. You could have approached me at any time. Instead, you chose to promote that deception, and am not sure how many others. Now it is up to me. Thank you, David, Alice pleaded. Don't tell the boys. The era of deception has ended. Children who are exposed to secrecy and deception lose faith in what they are told. They get insecure and dependent. When the family's foundation breaks, there may be no true connections remaining. The kids feel abandoned. So you either inform them, or I do. My God, Alice exclaimed. What should I say? Boys, your mother made a terrible mistake by betraying your father? I couldn't help smiling. Alice, you might want to skip the section about the cheap, deceitful, ungrateful girl from the slums. How about we explain to the boys that their mother made a mistake, but they are still our boys and our love for them remains constant. The boys handled it really nicely, given the ubiquity of step-parents, two-parent households, and blended families among their acquaintances. It appeared that our position did not bother them too much. Alice, on the other hand, felt bitter. She insisted we could find a solution, lamenting the waste of the house on which we had worked so hard. But ID hit my limit and wanted to go on. Interestingly, dealing with the house proved to be more difficult than the divorce itself. Our bank, Megabank, made it extremely difficult to return the property. They impeded our attempts at short sales and offered contradictory information, with different personnel responding to the same questions. The paperwork was enormous, and it felt as if we were single-handedly diminishing Washington State's woods through written requests. Fortunately, my brother Brian obtained the assistance of a legal specialist in real estate transactions and legislation, who swiftly established that the big bank had violated not only their own standards, but also multiple state and federal regulations intended to protect homeowners with underwater mortgages. In an unusual turn of events, Megabank ended up owing us money. Despite being served with 4 registered letters, they failed to appear at the court hearing, resulting in a default judgment in which we were granted the house as well as court and attorney expenses. Things took a dramatic turn when our attorney, backed by 2 armed sheriffs, a writ, and a moving company, appeared at a giant bank branch to seize assets, furniture, and computer equipment after the bank ignored several notices to pay attorney expenses. Local reporters flocked to the site, and even onlookers pitched in to help remove bank fixtures. As the surprised bank manager sought to call someone higher up, with his office phone seized, he turned to his personal cell phone. When the David versus Goliath story received national exposure, our attorney and I briefly became superstars. While we are grateful for the unexpected purchase of the house, it has complicated our divorce settlement. Alice was adamant that she would not sell the house immediately. After much discussion, she agreed to pay me half of the rental value plus utilities such as gas, electricity, and water. We would split insurance and taxes equally, and any future sale proceeds would also be distributed evenly. Following my recent divorce, like any middle-aged male, I rented a dingy apartment while I worked out my future steps. Naturally, I joined a gym in an effort to get back in shape. Despite my antipathy to the gym, I found myself in the reception area, dreading my next lesson with my personal trainer. I heard a familiar voice. David, oh my goodness, it's great to see you. I turned around to see Megan, my former neighbor. She looked great, dressed in tight training gear with the gym's emblem. Megan greeted me with an embrace. Her figure remained solid as ever, and I couldn't help but have a similar reaction. Megan, you look wonderful, I remarked as she let me go. What brought you here? I work here, David, part-time at least, Megan responded. glancing at the clipboard she was carrying. "And it appears I will be your personal trainer tonight. So, which machine would you like to start with? How about that vending machine?" I was joking. "I will purchase you the candy bar of your choice." Megan chuckled as she guided me through a maze of daunting gym equipment, a big cry from what I recall from my high school gym days. I tried to hide any susceptibility, but after 90 minutes, I vomited twice. In typical pseudo-macho form, I lied, blaming my frequent trips to the bathroom on excessive coffee drinking at work. The weights at the gym must have been in metric units because pounds never felt so heavy. Megan took pity on me and suggested we meet at a coffee shop after I staggered off to the locker room. She looked fresh and radiant as she grabbed my arm while we waited in line at a nearby cafe, whereas I felt completely tired. "Megan, when did ordering coffee get so complicated?" Bewildered by her extensive specifications, I commented to the cashier. "I recall when there were just 3 options: small, medium, and giant." Megan chuckled. Her familiar, high-pitched chuckle echoed in my ears. "David, simply tell the barista what you want, and he will prepare it for you." "Barista? Good grief." I shook my head in astonishment. "All good then? Give me something a guy can drink during a football game without being mocked." Megan swatted my shoulder as we sought a table. "David, I truly miss you." "Hell, Megan, you just miss having someone do the free house repairs." Megan breathed lightly on her coffee before responding. "So there's that." "I'm sad for you and Alice," she replied, taking a sip. "It's difficult to believe she cheated on you." I almost choked on my coffee. "What? Who? How? How did you find out?" Megan paused for a moment before setting down her cup. "Nobody told me. I've known you and Alice for a long time," she explained. "It's just an elderly cop's wife intuition. Alice has always had that 'I hope I don't get caught' look, that look at what I got away with. She exudes a certain energy." I contemplated Megan's comments. "So, Alice has never confided in you?" She shrugged. "No, David, she didn't. Would it matter to you if she did, if you know more information?" I shook my head. "No, it's not about cheating, though that is part of it. It's more about the deception and lack of trust. I have about the same chance of trusting Alice again as a blind man with a microscope. Without trust," I gestured, "what is the point? The marriage is over." I sought to lighten the mood by explaining the amusing details of our home bank repo meeting, as well as the unusual position of sharing a house with Alice, which made Megan laugh. I found myself absolutely enjoying the experience. We were both enjoying the chat so much that we lost count of time. Megan suddenly glanced at her watch. "I hate to cut this short, David, but I have to leave. The last bus is going to leave." "Not a problem, Megan. I will give you a lift." "Thanks so much. My automobile will not start. I think it's the starter, and with work lowering my hours, money has been tight. I will have to wait until payday to have it mended." I checked my watch. "Stop waiting, Megan. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Let's get a starter and fix it right now. We can get to the car parts store before it closes." "That would be incredible, David. For the past month, I've been leaving home several hours early every day to catch the buses, and it's still a 30-minute walk from the closest station to work." Megan hesitated. "But I do not have the money right now." I motioned for her to dismiss it. "Forget about it. You really need a car. We'll arrange for repayment whenever you're in a better financial position. Plus, all of my gear and things are still with Maymeen in Alice's garage. I have not gotten around to moving them yet." Standing up, I extended my arm towards her. "Come on, fair lady, the Prius hybrid chariot awaits." Megan gave me a puzzled look. "A hybrid Prius? What happened to your gigantic, muscular, manly SUV?" I grimaced. I grew bored of continuously stopping at petrol stations every day. I felt as if my carbon imprint was killing a portion of the rainforest. "Everyone keeps being judgmental of me. It looks like I did something wrong." Megan seemed amused. "I picture you in a hybrid. Yeah, I can almost feel my testosterone levels decreasing as I squeeze into that plastic jelly bean. You know how it goes with us fellas, size matters." She chuckled as I opened the car door for her. We were lucky to find a starter for Megan's automobile at the auto store. Finally, it was on sale. Even though Alice wasn't home, I still had the garage door code and the necessary tools, and 90 minutes later, I got Megan's car working nicely. Megan was overjoyed and held me firmly, laying a large kiss on my lips. I was unable to reciprocate the embrace because I was holding a greasy instrument, however. Another tool further south was making itself known. If Megan noticed, she didn't say it. But while washing up, I noticed the water spigot wouldn't totally shut off and the drain was slow to dry my hands. I motioned towards the sink. Megan, why didn't you tell me? I could have corrected it. David, I knew you and Alice were struggling with bigger issues. I did not want to bother you with minor matters. Besides, with the work cuts, I couldn't afford it. She turned away, but I noticed tears in her eyes. I am not someone to be pitied. I approached her and draped my arm across her shoulder. This is not charity. It's simply one neighbor helping out. I reassured her with a soft squeeze. Plus, I have a lot of free time now, and it appears that you have some responsibilities that require your attention. How about we write a list like Kris Kringle, double-check it. Now be a dear and bring me a pen and some paper. Megan blotted her eyes, yet a slight grin formed on her lips as she regarded me. All right, Santa. But if you're overly generous, I can't promise I won't be a little naughty. I spent the next fortnight visiting Megan's residence whenever I had free time. There was no need for extensive renovations, just a few minor tasks such as mending screen mesh, rusting door hinges, and caulking splash guards. Although I didn't get to see her mischievous side, I enjoyed our time together. One evening, after a few glasses of wine, Megan opened up about her first husband. Tom was a kind man, always willing to help people. He was sadly slain when a drunk driver hit him. He was not even on duty at the time. Had stopped on his way home from the gym to help a lady with a flat tire. The wicked drunk did not slow down. She paused to take another sip from her drink. But he was a fighter. He held on for 4 days. Do you remember the last thing he said to me? I stayed mute. Megan, tears streaming down her cheeks, conveyed that her husband's final words were not for himself, but for his family. He pleaded, look after our boys, take care of our boys, and take care of yourself. I approached her and comforted her as she proceeded. I never thought it would be like this. We did not receive any survivor benefits because he was not on duty. His small life insurance coverage helped us obtain this home. The police force cares after its own, and his comrades were always helpful. However, I needed to relocate regardless of their goodwill. Being near them acted as a continual reminder of his death. I never imagined it would be that difficult. I let Megan cry, knowing that sometimes quiet speaks more than words. The following morning, I was under the bathroom sink, repairing the drain, when I felt a tap on my foot. David, where did you disappear last night? I heard Megan's voice question. I returned to my scruffy little apartment. I responded, removing the drain trap. You were very out of it, so I made sure you were in bed before leaving. Coming out from under the sink, I extended my hand to show Megan the jammed drain trap. Goodness, look at all the hair. Have you ever bathed a long-haired dog in the sink? Suddenly, the front door opened, and I heard footsteps and a high-pitched voice. Where is he? What are you doing to my spouse, you terrible woman? I lifted my head out from beneath the sink, smacking my forehead in the process. I saw Alice's feet in the bathroom doorway. You are a wretch. Alice screamed at Megan. Leave him alone. I jumped to my feet, putting myself between a shocked Megan and an angry Alice. Alice, what are you doing here? I inquired, hoping to settle the atmosphere. Alice shifted her focus from Megan to me. David, I know exactly what's going on. Every night you leave this woman's house unkempt and sweaty, as if you had worked in the fields. I understand what you've been up to. She stopped as if to gather herself. I realize you want to get back at me, but you've had your fun with this woman. It is time for us to reconcile. I was so stunned that I couldn't say anything. Alice, reconciliation is not an option. A squandered opportunity. Aside from that, Megan and I had nothing before. Nothing occurred. But you know what? That will change soon. My husband, God rest his soul, always reminded me to take care of myself, and I'm going to start right now by taking your ex-husband upstairs and doing anything I can for him. Alice and I stood speechless. Megan stepped away from me and led Alice out the open front door. Don't be a stranger. Call me first. We will be busy for a while. Megan closed the door behind Alice, who remained mute. When Megan returned to me, I found my words. Megan, it happened. Thank you for your encouragement and self-esteem boost, but it was unnecessary. Megan stood directly in front of me. Are you certain you want to continue? Megan hugged me. David, I have known you for longer than I have known my husband. I loved him more than anybody else and fulfilled my commitments to him by raising our boys. Now it's time to keep another commitment he made to himself to take care of himself. She took my hand and brought me upstairs to the bedroom. I couldn't tell who was more anxious. I was concerned about not messing things up, and Megan hadn't been in a relationship with a man in about 20 years. However, similar to riding a bike, we kept our balance and found the appropriate tempo. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Megan said, David, you should move in with me. It was a declaration, not a question. Wait, that is certainly a bold statement. Aren't you concerned that this could just be a rebound? Megan raised herself up on her elbow, allowing me to admire her incredible physique. David, we've been pals for the majority of our lives, she began, lifting her hand to prevent any further interjection from me. We're too mature to play games. It is a mutually advantageous partnership. You need a place to stay. I also have a vacancy. I value you, and you value me. I have my wants, and you have your own. Why pay rent to an unidentified landlord when you can use that money to pay off your mortgage? Besides, you know this house better than anyone else. But Megan, won't this be awkward? I pointed across the street to my former home where Alice lived. Megan simply shrugged. Not my concern. I've stopped worrying about other people's opinions. Your opinion is what matters. Your former house is still in your name. That is a huge investment, and what better way to protect it than to keep an eye on it daily? So we complied. It felt strange for a while. Alice carried residual anger over the entire ordeal. She seemed incapable of moving forward. Damn you, David, Alice exclaimed one day while I was mending a crack in her driveway. When are you returning home? This is lunacy. You understand that you belong with me. What can I do? I apologize for everything. Simply tell me what needs to be done to make this all disappear. I saved the sealant before answering. Alice, you're sorry, and so am I. The truth is we are not reconciling. You need to get on with your life. Find someone else. Like who? Alice replied. I work at a salon with non-traditional hairdressers, and the majority of my clientele are first wives. She looked down at the ground. I never imagined I'd be one of them. I stayed silent and started gathering my equipment. Thank you, David, Alice begged. Can't you give me another chance? Let us forgive and forget for the sake of our sons. With the holidays approaching, we need to be together. Alice, I have forgiven you. But you passed up possibilities every day for more than a decade. As for forgetting, I shook my head. The holidays are definitely approaching. The boys will be home from school, and we will be able to enjoy separate dinners at both your and Megan's homes, with all of the kids like we used to. Alice crossed her arms defiantly. I refuse to have that woman in my home. I will not share the holidays with her. I considered her for a time before responding. Fine, Alice. Then the children and I will be at Megan's house. Alice's eyes softened. David, I can change. Please give me a chance. You know you should be here. Alice, I hope you find happiness one day, but that is not possible with me. You cannot control my life anymore. So we reached an agreement. We both received equal time with our boys and managed to avoid any major confrontations. The holidays were unusual but pleasant. Perhaps Alice realized how pointless it was to stand in the way of my happiness, or maybe she understood that her attempts at reconciliation were futile. Whatever the reason, we all adjusted, and the boys seemed content with their new reality. After all these years, I am not sure what the future holds, but I have learned to embrace the uncertainty and find joy in the present. As for Megan and me, who knows where this path will lead? For now, we are simply enjoying each other's company, and that is enough. Thank you for watching this story about David's journey through betrayal and finding peace. What do you think about his decision to move on? Was it the right choice, or should he have given reconciliation another chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Deceived Husbands for more stories. I awoke uncomfortable and confused, struggling to open my eyelids. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, my adult mind found the familiar sight of my bedroom ceiling comforting. The image of the nightmare that had woken me was still vivid. I felt like I was suffocating, a fear that had always haunted me. Once I managed to open both eyes and keep them open for more than a second, I noticed the cause of my discomfort. Tom was lying asleep on top of me. His left shoulder against mine meant I wasn't bearing the full weight, but his hips between my still wide-stretched legs were enough to restrict my breathing. Instinctively, I shoved him sideways, he rolled onto his back and immediately began snoring. I tried to recall what had woken me from deep slumber. It wasn't just the nightmare. Still not fully conscious, my mind wandered back to the pretense of putting the final touches on the contract we'd worked on together for months. Tom and I had left the office before lunch and come to my place for a nooner. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to share a bottle of wine before the important signing this evening, but I'd bought it specially, and it complemented the food perfectly. Why not celebrate in style? This contract was the biggest in the history of our firm. The fact that I'd been chosen to complete it meant I was on a fast track for career success. I also wanted to celebrate a change in my personal dynamics, a change I looked forward to immensely. That dragged my mind back to the man slumbering beside me. I'd fallen into bed with Tom about 6 weeks before, sharing the stress and long hours with my fellow lawyer and colleague, forming a bond that had almost inevitably resulted in the physical affair we were currently engaged in. Having crossed the line once, crossing it the dozen or so times since hadn't been a big deal for me. The unusual hours I was keeping plus the travel made it so easy. Still a little confused, I tried to recall details of how I'd ended up like this. My lips curled into a smile as details returned to me. With 6 hours to kill and much to celebrate, Tom and I parked in my carport and made out like teenagers. With the heat rising, we dragged each other through the internal door to my lounge, ripping each other's clothes off as we went. Once we were both naked, I forced Tom onto his back on the huge sheepskin in front of the fireplace. Going to the fridge, I returned with food, wine, and glasses. I got on top of him and lovingly fed him tidbits from my organized picnic. I cracked the bottle of red and poured 2 glasses. Not being able to lift the glass to his lips from his helpless position, I took a long draught from Tom's glass, held it in my mouth, then transferred it to him via a deep kiss. This is the life, I recalled thinking. Nice food, nice wine, and the anticipation of great fun to come. How could it be better? In the present, I wondered how much wine I drank. With effort, I thought back, alternating mouthfuls for me, then once for Tom. We damn near finished the bottle. That probably accounted for the metallic taste coating the inside of my dry mouth. With hunger for food satisfied, I recalled retaining the last swallow of my second glass in my mouth. Never once breaking eye contact with Tom, I slid off him and gave him an innocent kiss. I made a mental note to check the white sheepskin for red stains. When I went downstairs, a little had dribbled out during my maneuvers. We had some wild fun, and soon things became a little blurry after that. Memories of Tom pushing me off him, reaching down to sling me over his shoulder, and the heavenly trip up the stairs. I distinctly remembered him throwing me on the bed before embracing me with his resurgent excitement. Then what? Still groggy, I was confused not only by the lack of memory, but by the failure of the just recalled memories to excite me more than they were a few seconds ago. Concentration solved that last mystery. My bladder was giving out urgent signals, very urgent. With a supreme effort of will, I cast my grogginess aside, rolled off the bed, and staggered to the bathroom. I sat and relieved myself. The sheer length of time it took gave me time to notice outside input's weak light was spilling through the frosted glass of the bathroom window, the dawn chorus of twittering birds automatically triggering happy memories from a comfortable and contented life. Dawn chorus? Not even pausing to wipe myself, I launched into the bedroom and looked desperately at the bedside clock. 7:46 a.m. shone malevolently back at me. My subconscious desperately tried to lie to me and make me believe it was still light at 7:46 p.m. at this time of year. It failed. The last shreds of lethargy and delusion were swept away by a terrible realization. It was almost 17 hours after Tom and I were supposed to sign the most monumental deal in our firm's history, and somehow we'd both slept right through it. A chill paralyzed me for seconds as I felt the bottom fall out of my perfect world. My reflex was to get to work ASAP and salvage what I could. Taking the last 3 steps to the bed, I shook Tom's shoulders violently until his eyes drifted open, groggy. "Get up, you stupid prick! We slept through the night, it's almost 8, and our jobs are toast." I impatiently watched as what had taken me minutes was accomplished by Tom in seconds. He went from looking dazed to horrified. He jumped out of bed, staggered, then headed off downstairs to get his clothes. I followed, almost pushing him down the steps in my haste. I instinctively knew that any further berating of him would slow him down, so I settled for giving him dirty looks, even forgoing the time needed to put on my bra and just throwing on my discarded blouse and panties. Tom was fully dressed ahead of me. I had just picked up my pants, and he was sitting on the couch putting his shoes on when something made me look towards the front door. Confused, I noticed it was partially open, with only the safety chain holding it back. Vague recollections of the sound of it being opened and rattling against said chain itched against my consciousness as being the cause of my arousal from slumber some few minutes earlier. I was still looking at the cracked door when a shadow moved against it. Something long whistled through the crack and hit the chain. The screws flew from the mounting bracket, the latch swung through an arc and smashed the glass pane above before the door crashed fully open. The sight that met Tom and me could only be described as anger incarnate. Only a little over 5 feet tall, but almost as wide, the woman of obviously Southern European origin stood there with a heaving chest. The axe dangled from one mighty arm, her eyes blazing as she glared around the darkened room before settling on the seated man and half-naked woman. "Adrian!" Rosa gasped. "You stupid little bastard. They were right. You've been doing the dirty on me while I've been out of town nursing Mom." If the irate, weapon-wielding she-devil uttered anything coherent after that, it was lost on me. Seeing the axe raised and the first step towards us, I made for the stairs, only slightly hampered by the fact I had one leg in and one out of my pants. Halfway up, I was pushed the rest of the way by Tom, taking the steps 3 at a time. We raced together to the only refuge available, the master bedroom. Through the locked door and our own panicked gasping, we heard solid footsteps clumping up the stairs. A moment's silence was followed by the crash of an axe thudding into the door. The flimsy barrier moved enough that it was obviously not going to be a permanent defense. I retreated to the door of the balcony and threw it open. Internal debate on whether I was desperate enough to make the 10-foot drop was cut short as the tip of the axe finally made it through the wooden door. The sight of Tom accelerating towards me pushed the decision. I instinctively knew I didn't want to be the only one left alone in a room with that. Turning around, I grabbed the rail, forced my body over it, and lowered myself to my full stretch. Letting go, I dropped the rest of the way, landing heavily on my feet before falling on my ass, winded. Tom, following the same logic as me, vaulted straight over the balcony rail, landing awkwardly. His ankle rolled under him, and he gave an involuntary yelp of pain. My heart set on escape. I took off straight away. Instinctively, I made for the carport. Entering, I had my car door open before I noticed the strange car in the driveway, blocking mine in. I grabbed my handbag from the front seat and had just made it to the entrance when Tom painfully hobbled over. "Where's my car? We don't have time for this." I sped to the strange car, glancing around to check for signs of pursuit. My eyes were drawn to the 4 flat tires on my car. Confused, I looked into the strange car. I saw one thing that was good and one not so good. The former was the keys dangling from the ignition. The latter was the manual gear shift. I'd never bothered learning that. Our options flashed through my mind until the noise of an angry behemoth coming towards us told me we had none. "You drive, Tom." "I can't. Lily, my ankle is busted. You'll have to." Internal debate was useless. I jumped in the driver's seat and Tom hobbled around to the passenger side. I started the engine just fine, then asked what to do next. Tom looked at me, terrified and confused, until realization dawned. He told me to press the pedal on the left, then rammed it into reverse himself. Somehow, the car avoided stalling as I released the clutch and hit the accelerator. As we shot backward out of the drive, a swinging axe put a large divot in the screen right in front of Tom. I backed up the street until the armed woman chasing us gave up. With the luxury of time, Tom coached me through turning around. This included me stalling twice. Our first priority was to get to work as quickly as possible to salvage the contract that had been put in jeopardy by our sleep-in. I was annoyed that after the adrenaline of the past 5 minutes had started to fade, all Tom could do was complain about his sore ankle, then slump into semi-consciousness, rousing only when I forced him to answer questions. "I take it that was your wife?" "Uh-huh. How did she get the front door of my house open? It was deadlocked and everything. Thank God the safety chain was on, or she would have caught us fully in the act." That didn't require a response, so I didn't get one. Just before we got to our destination, the engine alternately whining with over-revs or shuddering due to being in too high a gear, Tom roused. "Lily, where was my car?" "I did drive it to your place yesterday, didn't I?" I didn't respond. I was still a little disoriented by the loss of a big chunk of time, then being awoken this morning at a time I didn't expect and in a very stressful manner. Well, that threw me. I was only half listening to Tom's next words. "Can we stop for a coffee or something? My mouth feels like it's had a hamster sleeping in it." "How much did we drink yesterday?" That brought to mind the taste I still had in my mouth. I ran my tongue over my palate. There it was, a sharp metallic taste. It tugged at my memory banks. I was distracted from those thoughts first by Tom's snore, and then our arrival at our place of business. I elbowed him awake, and we headed for the office. Outside the door, I looked at Tom's disheveled state, then became aware of my own unfettered breasts. I could only imagine how I looked. "Let's go into the bathrooms and clean up a bit. Meet me in my office, then we'll go and see Mr. Biggs." Neither of us took any notice of the receptionist picking up the phone as we headed for the stairs. We were each heading for the bathroom on our floor when we heard our names called. Mr. Biggs, the managing partner, was standing outside his office door. We couldn't ignore his crooked finger gesturing us both to enter his office. Preceding us in, he closed the door firmly, then walked behind his desk, glaring at us the whole time. I saw myself reflected in Tom's unkempt hair, rumpled clothes, and haggard looks. Finally, Mr. Biggs broke the silence. "Care to give me some explanation on why I spent all last night and this morning trying to salvage a contract after you stood up our client? Why I couldn't get either of you bozos on the phone when they rang me at 6 last night?" I ran various responses quickly through my mind. This was not good. It could put my career back a couple of years. This allowed a still groggy Tom to answer the uncomfortable questions. "Sorry, boss, we slept in." This response, coupled with our appearance, including my smeared makeup and improperly buttoned blouse revealing my braless breasts, told Mr. Biggs all he needed to know. In all his career, he'd never seen two such talented rising stars commit professional suicide quite so effectively. He paused as a plan formed in his mind. Maybe he could salvage the contract, but only if he offered the clients a couple of heads on a platter. "You two are suspended pending an investigation into your behavior. I suggest if you clean out your desks now, it may save you time later and save me the need to lay eyes on your stupid faces ever again." Tom and I both bowed our heads in shame. Tom turned for the door first, followed by me. Mr. Biggs' next words were so soft I almost missed them. "This will devastate your husband, Lily. Whenever we play golf together, it's always Lily did this or Lily said that. I don't know how I'll be able to face him after this." That almost made me stumble as I began the walk of shame to my office. Just outside the door, we were intercepted by the assets manager. "Tom, where were you last night? Where is your company car?" Tom shook his head. "This is serious. Did you drive your car last night?" "I don't think so. I went to sleep yesterday afternoon and didn't wake up until this morning. My car was missing." "Did you report it stolen to the police?" Tom just shook his head again. "Well, If I were you, I'd call the police straight away. They rang this morning to see who was assigned that car. Apparently, whoever stole it from your place used it to ram raid the local biker hangout. 2 of their guys were injured when it came through the wall of their clubhouse. You might want to think of a more convincing alibi before you call them." Tom turned to look at me in utter confusion. I had no answers to give him. I strode, and Tom hobbled to our respective offices. As we left with our personal effects and file boxes, we had to endure the indignity of the admin manager looking through the boxes to ensure no company equipment or data was being removed. Our colleagues stood silent witnesses as we were escorted to the door. We put the boxes in the back of Tom's wife's car. I pushed Tom away when he came in for a comforting hug. All that had happened in the last hour was because he didn't wake us up yesterday afternoon. Still stunned, we both sat in the front seat collecting our thoughts, Tom in the driver's seat. I looked at myself for the first time that day, then at Tom, and saw us as our boss had. How bloody stupid had we been? Tom proved he was finally back to reality when he spoke next. Job and marriage toasted in one day. Wow. I was about to rip into him for his inane and unhelpful comment when a screech of tires drew our attention to the car park entrance. Tom gasped at what he saw. Carlos! He quickly started the car and gasped as his injured ankle depressed the clutch pedal. We took off, heading out the entrance. We passed Tom's wife in the passenger seat of the strange car. The driver was big and angry. He glared at us as we passed. "Who the hell is Carlos?" "My wife's brother. He's bad news. I'm talking mafia bad. He spent more time in jail than out, and he's never liked me. His first spell in the joint was because he beat up some guy at school for saying Rosa was easy behind her back. Oh, now you tell me, you clown." As Tom sped away, I was relieved to see the other car boxed in as it tried to do a quick U-turn. I directed Tom to make a couple of quick turns as soon as we were out of sight. 5 minutes later, there was no sign of pursuit, and we were on one of the freeways through the city. We discussed where to go, but could come to no agreement. Obviously, Tom's house was out of the question, and now we knew that Rosa was aware of where I lived. So was my place. We were no closer to deciding a destination when Tom reached to the dashboard and turned on a device. He explained that it was his wife's habit of listening on the police radio channel. It's legal unless a person uses the information so gained in any way. The airwaves were busy giving the license plate number and description of the car we were in. It had been reported stolen and was linked to the ram raid of the previous night. Tom and I had no time to digest this before we saw flashing lights off to the side and heard the sirens wailing. I turned to see a motorcycle policeman alongside us with the rider gesturing for us to pull over. I told Tom to obey. The police motorcycle pulled in right in front of us. The rider got off and unhurriedly removed his helmet before walking towards us, looking at the broken windscreen. The pair sat silently as the policeman leaned in Tom's window. To our amazement, he asked if we knew it was illegal to drive with the screen in that condition. With relief, we realized he hadn't heard the recent bulletins. Tom gave his name and address because he couldn't produce a license. We held our breath as the officer returned to his bike, retrieved an iPad-type device, and began tapping away. He just looked back at us with alarm when our attention was drawn to the sound of loud, decelerating Harleys. They were going the opposite way, about 10 of them. The last few of them had their heads turned towards Tom and me. The rest were slowing down, looking for a gap in the railing to cross the median strip. Tom reacted automatically. He started the car, shoved it into gear, and took off. His plan, if he even had one, was to pass the motorcycle policeman on the inside and accelerate along the shoulder until he had the speed to pull into the traffic. He was so intent on looking in the wing mirror that he missed the policeman's reflex action. Hearing the car start behind him, the policeman stepped away from the bike and the road. My yell came too late to stop him from hitting the guy with the offside wing. Stopping wasn't an option, so Tom continued to accelerate. In my mirror, I watched in horror as the policeman tried to roll onto his feet, an impossible task with his legs sticking out at such an unnatural angle. I vented my spleen at my chauffeur. Tom, trying to ignore me, just pulled into the flow of cars, then wove in and out of the traffic at well above the posted speed. With no sign of pursuit, Tom took the second next exit and headed away from the freeway on increasingly minor roads. We both cringed whenever we saw a motorcycle. 5 minutes later, we spotted a shopping center car park and pulled in to let the aftermath of the adrenaline rush wash over us. I kept up a steady stream of abuse at both Tom's judgment and driving skills. He closed his eyes and tried to blot me out. He vaguely wondered which of his pursuers he should worry about the most. The police would lock him up and destroy what was left of his career if he was lucky. The bikers would just beat him up, maybe even kill him. No, they were chicken. The real threat was Carlos. If he almost killed the kid in school because he badmouthed his sister, how much trouble was Tom in? To distract himself, he rooted through his wife's glove box until he found an old Leatherman tool. After explaining his plan to me, I stood guard while he removed the license plates from the car next to ours. He put them on our car, then, as an afterthought, put our old ones on the other car. It was less conspicuous than leaving it bare. We had to buy time until we decided what to do. We then took off on the road leading further out of town, pulling into a secluded spot along a river. Exhausted and tired, we laid the seats back and rested. As an afterthought, Tom suggested I turn my phone off to prevent it from being tracked. "What the hell do we do now, Tom?" "Buggered if I know, Lily. I've got no phone, no wallet, and no money. If I turn up back at my place before she's had a chance to settle down, I'm toast. The same goes if I turn up at any of my family's places, I suspect. What about your place? They're probably watching it. But we could sneak in. Surely your husband will look after us, won't he? I don't know if we'll get much of a welcome there." "Why not? You said he knew about us and was cool with it. Well, I may have bullshitted a little about that. Yes, he did know about us, but I may have exaggerated about how well he took it so you could relax. So you mean I have to watch out for an angry husband as well as everyone else?" Jesus. No, he's not like that. He hasn't a malicious bone in his body and wouldn't hurt a fly. He's a pharmacist, and I think they take the same oath as doctors, not to hurt anyone. So he didn't take the news well then? Nope. He confronted me last week, knew your name and everything, gave me an ultimatum. Me, like an arrogant witch, though, I told him to get lost. I wanted everything a career that was going places, a nice house and car, a comfortable husband and family. I told him I demanded to have a lover that filled me up as well. If he couldn't live with it, I would get one of the partners as my divorce lawyer. He'd end up living in a shoebox, begging me to see the kids every month or so. I was bluffing, but he didn't know that. He lives for those kids. I half expected him to call my bluff, but he just stormed out. I haven't seen him since. The next day, I dropped the kids off at my parents' and met you at that motel last Monday. You remember? Despite everything we'd been through that day, Tom was horrified to be sharing a car and a nightmare with the creature I revealed myself to be. It took minutes for the speechlessness to wear off. So you gave him a choice: put up with you screwing around on him or lose everything. Why not? The law says I can get away with it, so why wouldn't I? Why look so shocked? Weren't you screwing around on your wife as well? Yes, I was, but I didn't insist on ripping her balls off to do it, pardon the pun. I shrugged. Tom saw me in a whole new light. With blinkers off, he realized that the smile he'd found so sensuous until now had a hard edge to it. He couldn't imagine such cruelty as the one I just blithely described, with all the signs of a clear conscience. For my part, I wondered where I could get a drink. I still had that damned metallic taste in my mouth. I joined Tom in dozing until hunger woke me in the late afternoon. I roused before him and turned my phone on to send a quick text to my mother to look after the kids indefinitely. God knows what my parents were being told. When Tom woke, we pondered the known mysteries of the last few days to avoid the difficult questions like, what the hell are we going to do next? Not turning up for a contract signing after having obviously slept together had lost us our jobs, obviously. But what made us sleep for a solid 17 hours? Then, how had Tom's wife not only known where to find him, but had a way of opening the front door. We knew if it wasn't for the safety chain, we would both have had our skulls crushed in. We'd seen the look in Rosa's eyes. We were stuck on this point when I glimpsed Carlos' car cruising slowly down the road through the trees. It kept going, however, and as soon as it disappeared around a corner, we took off the other way. Tom was pissed when he learned that I had turned my phone on earlier. He reached over to grab it and throw it out the window, but I protected it. Again, we turned off as quickly as possible and headed in a completely different direction. That didn't matter. We didn't have a destination in mind anyway. It was 2 hours before dusk when we passed a remote fuel station about 125 miles from home. With a glance at the fuel gauge, Tom took the risk and pulled in. While he fueled up at the automatic Bowser, I went in, used the facilities, then grabbed some food before going to the counter to pay. 2 attempts at paying with my debit card were declined. I looked to see how much cash I had while the attendant tried my credit card. That was declined as well. Just then, the attendant looked over my shoulder and asked what my husband was waving at. I turned and saw Tom gesticulating to me furiously. I sprinted from the office, deaf to the shouts of the shop assistant yelling about the food I still held clasped in my hands. I walked briskly to him. He was babbling about 2 bikers that had just showed up. One of them had immediately gotten his phone out. I ordered him to get in and go. Tom obeyed with haste, and we sped off. I watched in the mirror as the bikers gave chase. I didn't think it was a good time to burden him with the fact that the police had arranged for my cards to be canceled to stop us from running. We'd only made it a couple of miles when the sound of revving motorcycles could be heard over our own screaming engine. 1 bike was on each of our back quarters. Tom steered into the middle of the road as we went around a corner. As soon as we hit the next straight, the bike behind our left side surged forward to overtake. Reflexively, Tom edged left. That allowed the guy on the right to seize the opportunity. He was level with the rear door before Tom saw him in the mirror. Purely on instinct, he swung the wheel to the right. He didn't hit the bike, but the cyclist's own reflex was to veer off right, off the side of the road. I looked on in fascination as the bike went into the spoon drain before catapulting the rider off. I watched as his mate slowed and turned to assist him. With adrenaline running high, Tom asked if I'd seen what was on the cyclist's jackets. When I said that it showed a guy in a Mexican-style sombrero, Tom groaned and explained that was the Bandidos, a club with a violent reputation. Both driver and passenger anxiously watched the fuel gauge. Tom had only just started fueling up when the bikes arrived. Right on dusk, with the fuel gauge wrapped around the peg, Tom pulled off into a quiet country lane and killed the engine. In the last light of day, we could see a farm and outbuilding several hundred meters away. Sitting separate from everything else on a stand was what looked like a 10,000-liter tank, complete with hose and nozzle. Tom reckoned in the gloom of early evening, lights were on in the farm building, but otherwise, no one was in sight. He checked that the fuel nozzle wasn't locked, and liquid came out when the trigger was pressed. He looked around in the gloom for some sort of container, but found none. He debated whether or not to turn his phone on and use the torch function. Concern about being traced through it won over the urge to keep moving. Tom returned to the car and we hunkered down to wait. The plan was to wait until midnight, push the car to the Bowser, fuel it up, and continue running. To while away some of the time until the lights went out in the farm, Tom and I started talking about the strange events of the last day and listing who was after us. First, we'd fallen asleep while making out on my bed. That in itself wasn't strange, but sleeping for 17+ hours was. Unconsciously, I grabbed the remains of the packet of potato chips I'd shoplifted from the roadhouse. Maybe they would remove the lingering taste from my mouth. Much of what happened since we woke that morning, or was it a week ago, was caused by Tom's car apparently being used to ram raid the local biker hangout. Obviously, it had been stolen, and given time, Tom could have convinced the bikers of that. That was all a little academic now, after we'd injured one or worse escaping from the roadhouse. Through the slightly optimistic eyes of those in these types of situations, we reviewed the motivations and intentions of those arrayed against us. Tom thought that his wife and brother-in-law would be satisfied by a light beating followed by a rapid wife-centric divorce agreement. The police, what did they know? Only that he'd knocked over and injured an officer and failed to stop. The failing to stop was justifiable given the bikers. Would the injury result in jail time? We both considered it a small possibility. It was a justifiable accident after all. That left only the bikers. Tom suggested that their reputation had been exaggerated by the media, and they weren't actually as bad as everyone made out. I kiboshed that optimistic line of reasoning. My husband used to be in a biker club. He described a culture of crime that was an accepted way of life, and violence was endemic. My husband's office in the club was in charge of stealing cars, either for sale or for use in their various nefarious activities. It became obvious to Tom that due to my memories of those stories, I was very, very afraid of the bikers. I went on to describe how my husband had escaped from the criminal life, got a straight job, and worked his way through university. It was obvious that I was quite proud of my pharmacist. The car went quiet, and silence reigned until the lights went out in the farmhouse. Between Tom and me, we pushed the car with difficulty over to the Bowser. Nervous and panting, Tom opened the fuel cap on the car and started filling it. It gurgled nicely into the tank until it overflowed. Hobbling back to the driver's side, he got in, started the engine, then floored it so the farmer wouldn't glimpse us and pass on a description. We had just made it to the farm gate, about 50 meters, when the car hesitated. 20 meters later, all the lights on the dash went on as the engine stopped. Looking out the back window, I urged Tom to get it restarted. Despite continuous cranking, it refused. A horrible thought occurred to me. Is this car petrol or diesel? Petrol. Needs 98 octane, I think. And what was in that Bowser? Most farm equipment runs on diesel, doesn't it? How the hell should I know? I'm a city boy. We both began yelling at each other and still were when Tom's door was wrenched open and the farmer dragged him out. Pressing him to the side of the car, he demanded loudly to be told what the hell was going on. I used the opportunity to jump out. The car was in a gateway, and there was no room to get between them, so I was forced to go around the back, then along the driver's side. As I passed the struggling pair, I saw a short length of tree limb, about 3 inches thick and 3 feet long. It was bad enough being on the run. The thought of being on the run alone was terrifying. With only a second's hesitation, I picked up the log and, with no style, whacked the farmer over the back of the head. He went down like a sack of spuds. Wide-eyed, we stared at each other. Then Tom hobbled after me as I fled toward the highway. Using my impromptu club as a walking stick, we didn't hesitate when we reached it. Just started walking in the direction we'd been going all day, towards nothing. Away from everything we knew. We threw ourselves off the road every time a car came along. 2 hours later, we passed a sign saying the next town was still 6 miles ahead. We were both mentally and physically exhausted. Tom's ankle hurt like hell, and I was starting to get blisters. Spotting a lone barn, we forced our way through the fence and made for it. There was enough hay in it to provide an adequate bed. We both fell into a troubled sleep. Day 2. I woke way before dawn, still tired, hungry, and thirsty. I was a little confused, not realizing where I was. The metallic taste still in my mouth brought the unpleasant memories of the previous day crashing back. Strangely, my first coherent thought was of my children. My recent entitled selfish mantle aside, I loved my children. If I could avoid being killed or thrown in jail, I would go home, hug my children like never before, and wait for my husband to come groveling back to me. With time, things could go back to normal delusions, all of them, but believed by a famished, thirsty, exhausted, and desperate mind. How much trouble was I in, I asked myself. Tom's wife and her mob brother were after Tom. If I could get to the police, they would protect me. It was Tom's car that had been used in the ram raid and Tom who knocked that biker over. They were after him, not me. Again, the police could protect me from them. That left only the police to worry about. What had I really done wrong? Pilfered some stuff from a roadhouse without paying hardly a custodial offense. Now I'd assaulted a farmer. That was time for sure. But how did the world know it was me that did it? The solution to all my problems suddenly became obvious. If I left Tom sleeping and got to the nearest police station first, I could lay just about all the blame on him, even claiming the assault on the farmer was him. By turning him in, all I could expect was a slap on the wrist. Once the world knew where he was, they'd forget about me, and I could sneak quietly back home. I examined my conscience with this plan in mind. Could I do that to my lover? Like most relationships that come out of cheating, I realized ours was doomed from the start. He was just a new toy when I needed one. Besides, he was a cheater. I'd never trust him enough to have a long-term relationship. I smiled to myself and prepared to sneak away from the barn. A faint rustling noise caught my attention. In the moonlight, I saw Tom quietly picking up his shoes and heading out of the barn. Instinctively, I knew what was happening. After his own internal debate, Tom the rat had decided to shop me, the little witch. Enraged, I sprang to my feet, picked up my walking stick, and brought it down on Tom's head. He went down and stayed there. Removing his shoes, I threw them in separate directions into the darkness. My plan was modified. I'd claim self-defense when it came time to explain this episode to the police. Just as I was about to leave, I risked turning on my phone briefly to check the time and distance to town. I was almost done when it began operating and changing screens by itself. In a panic, I realized that it was being controlled remotely. Only one person could do that, the person whose phone it was paired with. Why would my husband be trying to find me? No, I thought. The police must have insisted he give them his phone. I quickly removed the battery and restarted towards town, ears ever vigilant for the sound of approaching traffic in the pre-dawn darkness. As I walked, I plotted. I would accept my slap on the wrist, then demand my husband come back home. If he played up, I'd use my secret fund, siphoned off my salary into a separate bank account to divorce him. Not working, and not in a hurry to get another job, I'd demand maximum child support while making it impossible at every turn for him to see the kids. After the appropriate amount of groveling, I might take him back. This time, if he objected to my taking a new lover, he'd know exactly what was in store for him. Before I was a third of the way to town, even my seething rage couldn't mask the pain of my feet from the inappropriate footwear. Even my blisters had blisters. But stagger into town, I did. The police station was halfway along the main street, but a sign on the door said it wasn't manned until 9:00 a.m. I guessed it was around 7:00, so I sat on the step to wait. I'd no idea how much time passed, but I gradually became aware of a mounting roar. It penetrated my overloaded, tired brain that it was the sound of motorcycles, many, many motorcycles. Leaping to my feet, I ran around the side of the police station and hid in some bushes. As I peeped out, I saw pairs of bikers stop every 50 meters or so down the main street, get off, and look around. The door of the station opened, and a uniformed man with sergeant stripes walked to the curb and looked up and down the street. I jumped up and ran into the open door. Curiously, the policeman followed me in. The sergeant was very interested to hear who I was. When I told him where Tom had been when I last saw him, he jumped on the radio and briskly gave orders to his unit on patrol. He then made some other calls before interviewing me properly. I was very cooperative, and soon he had a witness statement attesting to 2 assaults by motor vehicle and an assault on the farmer. Partway through, a groggy Tom was brought in. The sergeant took one look at him and called an ambulance. When it arrived and Tom was stretchered up and loaded, the bikers closed in but were kept at bay by the police escort. As the ambulance and escort drove off, I peered around the door frame and saw Carlos sprinting for his car and a ton of bikers racing for their rides. Things quieted down again, and I finished my statement. I denied knowing anything about how Tom was injured. With only shoplifting to my name, I was formally charged and told I could go. With my part in the serious injury of an officer, the police weren't at all cooperative about letting me use a phone. My mobile having gone flat, I decided to walk to the nearest payphone to make a call. To who, I hadn't yet decided. Suddenly all hell broke loose in the station. Gradually, I pieced the story together. The ambulance and escort had been hijacked by unidentified bikers and others. Luckily, no one resisted and everyone was unharmed. Tom was missing. I sighed now there was no one to refute my side of the story. I stepped out into the street and saw half a dozen bikers in either direction looking at me. I ran back inside and asked for protective custody. Still in an unforgiving mood, the sergeant laughed and asked, "For what? Shoplifting?" I was told that as it was public property, they couldn't force me to leave until 5:00 p.m. when they closed. I begged and pleaded, but the sergeant was vindictively adamant. Just before 5:00, I checked to see if the bikers were still there. They were. Sore, hungry, tired, and weary beyond belief, I felt I had no choice. Dropping my chin to my chest, I turned and walked back into the station. 15 minutes later, the sergeant had a confession to 2 serious assaults, and I took residency in a nice, safe cell. On the other side of town, my husband put down the phone. The call from his lawyer had told him not to expect me home in the next 5 years or so. It also predicted one of the quickest and most one-sided divorces in history. He glanced toward the tempting bottle of Lafroig. He'd been nudging the bottle a little much in the last month or so, ever since our wedding anniversary. He'd been at work and needed the date for a form. Glancing at the calendar, his heart sank as he realized it was our anniversary. Like the last time he forgot it, he predicted he was going to cop a flogging when he got home. He was just in the middle of arranging to leave early to buy a gift when I rang. I had to work late that night. I'd obviously forgotten our anniversary as well, which was very, very out of character for me. Something must really be distracting me. He did leave early and did buy me a nice necklace, then was home in time to meet the kids from school and make them a healthy dinner. I came home after 9:00, and he looked at me unemotionally. For once I avoided coming over for the customary kiss or even making eye contact. With blinkers off, he could see I was freshly showered. The hair on the nape of my neck was still damp. There was no mention of the missed anniversary. He was lucky that I was so busy hiding my own demeanor that I totally failed to spot his unusual one. The rest was easy. He waited for me to work late again, followed me from my office to a restaurant, then a motel, and noted my lover's number plate, then did his research. He had no plan when he confronted me. For the sake of the children, he may have forgiven me if I'd been suitably remorseful and convinced him it would never happen again. My actual reaction shocked, appalled, but most importantly, offended him. He left to calm down, to avoid physically hurting me. Cheap, commercially available telephone and email bugs provided the data necessary to fulfill the rest of his plan. The whiskey bottle beckoned to him still. Why not? The kids were in bed, it would be harmless. That made him sad. Tomorrow he'd have to have that conversation with his kids. They wouldn't be seeing their mom for a while. Well, not unless she found another source of bail money. That was a conversation he really wasn't looking forward to. He thought back to the paperwork shuffle he'd accomplished at work today. With luck and only a cursory audit, the missing sleeping pills would never be missed. If one of 6 customers actually counted the pills in the bottle and reported them one short, then he'd get a light rap on the knuckles. He idly picked up his phone and deleted the tracking program. Then he deleted a few contacts he would never need again. Lily Rosa. Checking his bank balance online showed him that all their old joint account balances had all been transferred to his new account. The balance was consistent with the contents of my secret account being added as well. As soon as he'd come to terms with the fact I could be deceptive, he'd gone looking. The arrogance of the woman, putting the statements in a folder next to the regular accounts, relying on the fact that he took little interest in the family finances, them being my domain throughout our marriage. My password had been predictable. He shook his head. How long had I known him? Did I really believe he'd contemplate for even a second leading the life of a cuck, to give up the pride he knew was the cornerstone of his belief system? He knew he would die for his kids, how much easier it would be to kill for them. He rubbed his sore knee bloody cheap Japanese cars the dashboard shouldn't collapse after the car hit one itty-bitty little brick wall. He poured himself a generous tot for medicinal purposes only, you understand. Pulling out his checklist, he double-checked everything was completed, then lit it with the firelighter and threw it into the fireplace. As he watched it burn, He scoured his brain for anything he'd missed, but once again could not find a base uncovered. He took another sip and, for the first time in weeks, fully relaxed. "That'll do, Jake. That'll do. Thanks for tuning into this wild and intense story. What would you do if you found yourself in Lily and Tom's shoes, caught in a web of betrayal and chaos? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking tales. See you next time." Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Deceived Husbands for more stories. My phone rang at the worst possible time as I was studying the project I was working on. I pulled it out of my pocket and didn't recognize the number. Fearing it was a telemarketer, I answered. It was worse. "Can I speak to Adam Green?" the officious voice asked. I assured her she was speaking to Adam Green. "Hold for Miss Taylor," the voice ordered. Instead, I hung up. Within a minute, I got another call. "Mr. Green, I'm sorry we were cut off. Please hold for Miss Taylor." Again, I hung up. The phone started ringing again. I answered with an exasperated tone. The caller explained how this scenario was supposed to work. I interrupted. "Please inform Miss Taylor that I have no inclination to talk to her today or any other day." I hung up and tried to focus on my work. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. I saw the same number and let it go to voicemail. Soon, the icon appeared indicating a message. I didn't feel any need to find out what it was. I had decided on my course of action and began placing items. The phone interrupted again, and I turned it off. One of the first lessons I ever learned about power tools was to concentrate on what I was doing. It helped maintain safety and made time pass quickly. I focused on placing the two 4 by 10 feet pine boards into a vertical parallel pattern with 16 in intervals between the studs. Then came the horizontal 2 by 4 S, one on top, two on the bottom. Using my measuring tape, I determined it was square and went at each stud, driving nails from the power hammer to secure the studs into the frame. I stopped to examine my work, decided it was acceptable, and lifted the frame upright, bracing it against the unfinished basement wall. Leaning against the frame, I quickly found one of the pre-drilled holes I had made in the horizontal bottom board, grabbed the second air hammer, and drove the long concrete nails all along the bottom. A quick look with my level showed it was okay, and I quickly braced the top. Another check to ensure it remained square, and I stepped back to observe the result. By itself, it didn't look like much in the stark, empty basement, but I had made the frame and had it up within 15 minutes. At 4 frames an hour, I should complete the framing this evening and be one step closer to completion. I was glad the earlier projects of running the conduit lines, electrical wiring, and HVAC ductwork had worked out well. Thank God the plumbing was already installed, so that was one headache I wouldn't have to worry about. This evening I would finish the framing, Saturday put up the insulation and paneling, and Sunday lay down the wood parquet tiles. That would justify my weekend reward of a 6-pack of beer icing down in my cooler. Hard to believe that in a few short weeks I would check off the entire basement project. Hard to believe I now limited my drinking to a single 6-pack of beer per weekend, 2 beers a day after all daily tasks were completed. It hadn't been that long ago that a 6-pack was just a warm-up for some serious drinking. Thanks to Miss Taylor, or rather, Miss Amanda Taylor, my ex-wife. I shook my head at the animosity I felt for Amanda now. How could a woman I was so totally committed to and in love with turn out to be such a witch? I forced myself to focus back on my framing. The more I worked, the less time I had to think, the sooner I would get through so I could jump into a hot shower and then knock down the 2 long necks and head to bed. If I was lucky, there would be no dreams. That was the crux of my existence nowadays, stay busy, so there was no time for the pain. It was a hell of a way to live, but it beat dying every day. With that last thought, I began preparing the boards for the 2nd frame and the 3rd and the 4th and so on down the line. I staggered upstairs for my libations and a hot shower before bed. When I woke up, I remembered to turn on my cell phone again. 20 freaking calls and voicemail messages, all from the same source as yesterday. I dumped all the calls without bothering to listen to whatever demands Amanda's secretary thought were necessary. As I dressed, I was cheered by the fact that I wouldn't be bothered for the weekend. I went on my computer and checked a few pressing business situations, sent out several emails on how to deal with them, and went downstairs. A quick trip to the kitchen provided me with my bowl of Wheaties, and I munched down my breakfast of champions. With a sigh, I trudged back downstairs to the basement, put on my mask, and started installing the rolls of insulation to the frames. I had a portable radio tuned to a classic rock station, and I whiled away the hours, interspersing the songs with the noise of my labors and the occasional profanity slipping from me. By mid-afternoon, I had completed the insulation installation and went upstairs to fix a sandwich. As I ate the turkey sandwich, I stared outside at the gloomy, rainy February day. It reminded me of another rainy February day from last year. I remembered standing drenched outside my in-laws' house after landing in Philadelphia on Christmas morning. It would be a surprise visit, as I certainly didn't get an invitation to attend from either my wife, children, or parents-in-law. When the door swung open, I saw the surprised look on my brother-in-law's face. Before he could come up with some lame excuse, I managed to walk by him into the happy bustle in the house. My 12-year-old son, Jake, looked down at the floor. Lily, my 15-year-old daughter, hurriedly excused herself from the room. My wife Amanda extracted herself from the lap of the stranger holding her so familiarly. Even in her shame, she sought to mitigate the damage by introducing me to Mark Roberts. The stranger arose out of the chair and held out his hand for me to shake. I just stood there and stared at him until he finally dropped his hand. Meanwhile, my dear mother-in-law scurried into the room to ensure nothing dramatic would happen. I thought at least I was getting her carpet wet as the raindrops continued to drip off my trench coat. "Why, Adam, we weren't expecting you." "When did you arrive?" the witch said. I ignored her as I tried to catch my wife's face, but she apparently found something very interesting on her mother's wall and wouldn't turn to face me. I went back to the front door, walked outside, pulled out my cell phone, and called a taxi service. With any luck, I could catch the cab that had dropped me off before he got too far away. No one from inside the house came out to persuade me to stay. I sighed as the painful memory came to an end. I went back down to the basement to begin installing the sheets of paneling. The job went by quickly as the sheets, while bulky, covered a large area. I used the paneling nails to drive into the studs with my claw hammer. Lucky for me, the paneling had cutouts for electrical wall outlets and heating and air vents, all fitting perfectly. Now I could use the heating unit, but I quickly worked up a sweat, so there wasn't much need for heat. I was pleased I had planned so carefully, as I only had a few boards and a couple of sheets of spare paneling left over. I carried them to the garage and stowed them away until I had a chance to get them into the workshop. I installed the electrical outlets and completed the wiring sequence for each one. Since I used traditional color coding, there was no way to mess up a ground wire to a hot wire. After hooking up the system to a circuit breaker in the breaker box, I determined that I had power to each new outlet and adequate circulation to the HVAC system. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a big deal, but I screwed in the outlet covers and duct covers. I then swept the floor several times with the shop vac to get it ready for the adhesive I would be applying in the morning. But now, a shower was calling for me. The hot water soothed my aching muscles, and I luxuriated in the steamy water. What a contrast to the bone-chilling cold I felt going back to Philadelphia International Airport that past Christmas. I was numbed physically and mentally as I negotiated a ticket back home. Damn the cost, I knew my marriage was dead. I just didn't know when the funeral would take place. I toweled off and decided to go to bed. Tomorrow would be another long and hopefully rewarding day. Almost immediately, I fell asleep. Sunday morning, I woke to the sound of a thunderstorm brewing outside. I slipped on my jeans, work boots, and a shirt and trudged downstairs. I only hoped we wouldn't lose power during the day. I turned the radio to a sports station to catch the game. I began to apply the adhesive liberally to the basement floor, smoothing it evenly throughout the entire surface area. I had considered making a custom oak parquet floor for the basement, but decided it would not be cost-efficient. So I had boxes of pre-made parquet tiles waiting by the stairs. I waited for the adhesive to set for its optimal time before starting to set the tiles down. I went back upstairs and mentally took notes on how to proceed for the next big project, sanding down the floors and staining and varnishing them in the most expedient manner. I made a list of the tools I would need to rent a floor sander, and a floor buffer were the two most important. The other tools, small sanders, pry bars, hammers, brushes, rollers, I already had in the workshop. I would have to be extra careful not to crack or break the vintage baseboards or moldings. I would also have to catalog each piece, so I would be able to fit each one to the room it belonged in. I went into the kitchen and brewed a pot of coffee. I looked around the improved kitchen I had finished a month ago. Bright fluorescent light lit up the entire kitchen area. The new state-of-the-art appliances sparkled. I sat in the breakfast nook adjacent to the new food preparation island I had built. The new Mexican glazed tiles added a colorful atmosphere to the island. All I had to do was knock out a non-load-bearing wall to a room that was previously a small servant dining area to vastly extend the entire kitchen. Even expanding the shelves and pantry still made the room too big. I finally built a brick pizza oven that set off the final touch to the kitchen. The thought of pizza brought to mind how I met Amanda, and I drifted off back in time. It was at a freshman mixer at a local pizza parlor at my university. I really didn't want to go, but my roommate insisted. I stood there nursing an illicit underage beer when I saw a tall brunette nearby. She was athletic-looking, with long, muscular legs and an amazing body, and she was being harassed by some drunken idiot. I couldn't hear what he said, but whatever it was earned him a slap across his face. Before he could react, I intervened and stood between them so he couldn't assault her. That didn't deter his rage as he tried to get to her. I managed to remain between them as he jostled me every way he could think of. Finally, the bouncers showed up and escorted the guy out. I turned around and stared right into the loveliest set of green eyes I think I've ever seen. She introduced herself as Amanda, and I told her I was Adam. We sat and talked for a while, then she excused herself, and I thought I would never see her again. A month later, I was walking across campus and I heard someone yelling at me. This crazed female, dressed in a raggedy outfit with Greek letters across the bib, ran up to me. "Hi, do you have a condom?" The stunned look on my face led her to explain that she was pledging a sorority and needed to get a condom from a student on campus to complete her last task before getting accepted. I could only nod and blush as I opened my wallet and handed her the one I had kept since I was in the 9th grade. She screamed in delight, grabbed it, and ran off to her sorority house. I just watched as that lovely body disappeared from view. Another month passed, and the campus prepared for homecoming. I was walking back to my dorm when this person started walking beside me. I looked and tried to recognize where I had seen this girl before. "Hi, are you ready to rescue me for the 3rd time?" I responded. "I beg your pardon?" She stopped, which forced me to stop, and she repeated, "Are you ready to rescue me for the 3rd time? You saved me at the pizza parlor and when I needed to pledge my sorority. Now I need you to save me again." Puzzled, I asked, "How am I supposed to rescue you?" She explained. "I'm supposed to go to homecoming with a guy from our brother fraternity, but the guy is a real jackass. The only way I can get out of going is to have a date with someone else." I sarcastically said, "Well, that works wonders for my ego. How could I refuse such a gracious offer?" I don't think she realized I was putting her on. She told me what sorority house she lived in and what time to be there. I walked off, wondering what the hell had just happened. I went back to my room and told my roommate what had transpired. He urged me to go on the date since otherwise I would just spend the evening like every other Saturday night studying. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a condom, and told me I might just get lucky. In fact, I did not get lucky. I did spend the entire day getting acquainted with Amanda as we both ignored our inept football team and conversed throughout the game. After we left the stadium, we decided to go to a small coffee house to continue our talk. We were so animated that before we knew it, they were closing the place down. We walked back to her house and I stalled, trying to decide whether to try for a kiss. Amanda decided for me as she told me goodnight and walked away without even a peck on the cheek. I took that to mean that I didn't really make the grade as I walked back to my room. When I got in, my roommate was gone. I had grown accustomed to not expecting him to appear back before Sunday evening. I lay on my bed and fell asleep thinking of those green eyes. All next month I tried to call Amanda, only to be told she was unavailable. Word got back to me that she had started dating some other fellow. I was sad that I had lost out before I even had a chance to get into the game. A clap of thunder shook me out of my reverie of Amanda, and I went back to the basement, laying down the tiles in the tongue and groove set on the sides of the tiles. I halfway listened to the game, and only stopped to retrieve a new box of tiles. When I got to the end of the floor, I stood and looked at the tiles, pleased at how they complemented the paneling. Not wanting to stop, I nailed down the miter baseboards, and voila, it was finished. Now all I had to do was install the track lighting and the crown molding, and it would be done except for decorating the basement, but that was for another day. Today, I would celebrate. The business week would start in the morning, and I would focus solely on making money during those hours. Perhaps in the evenings I would complete some small jobs around the house that weren't worthy of wasting a weekend on. Then Friday, the cycle would repeat as I continued to stay busy working on the house. That Friday, I went to the hardware store and picked up the rented floor sander and buffer in my work pickup truck. I also purchased enough coarse, medium, and fine-grade sandpaper pads to complete both floors of my house. Throughout the week, I had spent the evenings carefully prying up the molding and baseboards in all the rooms. I had cataloged each piece and already sanded them down. All I would have to do was sand the areas using the sander, since the baseboards and molding would conceal the area close to the walls. I wouldn't have to sand exactly to the walls. My phone rang, and I saw yet another call from Amanda's office. Sporadically through the past week, I had received calls from her so much that I finally put the number on speed dial so I could instantly recognize it. That got me thinking of a Friday phone call a long time ago. I was studying when the dorm phone rang. I figured it was for my roommate since he was the only one to get calls, but he had already left, so I answered and was ready to take a message for him. "Where the hell are you?" the voice screamed at me. Taken aback, I said, "Who is this? What do you mean, who is this? This is Amanda. Now, where the hell are you?" Pissed off, I said, "Well, you called me. Where the hell do you think I am? Look, just get over here pronto." I debated not going, but the enticement of seeing her was too persuasive, so I wound up at her sorority house. I gave my name and waited. Soon I saw Amanda in the hallway, apparently arguing with some guy. The conversation was quite animated as she pointed at me, which earned a look of loathing from the guy. She stormed outside and said, "We gotta go," and started leading me away. After a distance, I stopped and said, "Can you tell me what the hell this is about?" She looked angrily at me and said, "That fraternity creep was bothering me again." "And how is that my fault?" I asked. "I needed help," she yelled. "Why didn't you call your boyfriend?" I turned and walked away. I wound up back at the coffee house where we went on our homecoming date. She came in and sat down beside me. She started talking, and before I knew it, I was over being pissed off. Then she told me she wanted to see me, but with one small caveat. "Look, I'm attracted to you, but I'm not ready to be tied down to one guy, so I want to date you as well as others. If this is meant to be, then we will both know it. Can you handle that?" I wasn't too thrilled with the idea of sharing her with anyone. Then she leaned over and kissed me, and I knew I was a lost soul even then. Some weekends I was lucky enough to get a date with her, and other weekends I would languish back in my room, torturing myself with thoughts of her with someone else. After 4 months, I finally had sex with her in her car, and I was even more smitten. Try as I could to convince her, she still refused to stop dating others. That convoluted merry-go-round went on for the next 2 years until one day she came up to me. "I'm pregnant." The earth stood still. She continued to look at me and said it was mine, and I knew what she expected me to do. Mentally, I was screaming inside. I had 1 more year to get my BA in business, then I would get my MBA and go collect a large salary. Then I would be in a position to propose to Amanda. Now was way too soon. Amanda's plan was to get her degree in history and apply to law school. That meant 3 more years for her as well. Now, all of a sudden, plans would have to change. We started talking and came up with a solution. We would have a quiet wedding. I would go out to work and support her through law school. When she got a job, she would support me while I got my MBA. Then we would live happily ever after. That was when the shit hit the fan. I met her mother, also known as the evil witch of the North. She screamed at me for ruining her daughter's life from day one and never let up on me since then. My grandmother, who had raised me, also had reservations about the marriage, but limited it to insisting that her house, which I would eventually inherit, be protected by a prenuptial agreement. Amanda was pissed about that, but my grandmother insisted, and she finally signed off on it. We had our quiet shotgun wedding and began living together. That last year in school was rough with Amanda's pregnancy and me trying to support us with any number of odd jobs that came along. I mowed yards, did small home repairs and contract labor. Nothing was too low as long as it brought money to the table. Somehow we made it through and we both graduated. Amanda gave birth to our daughter Lily and was accepted into law school. Amanda's mom flooded her house with graduation pictures and pictures of the baby. I wasn't included in any of them. I had lucked into a stock brokerage internship, which meant I did all the crappy jobs none of the brokers would do, but I persevered, from doing cold calls to going out to get lunch deliveries. By persevering, I wound up getting my broker's license and began trading stocks under the supervision of a senior broker. As my expertise grew, so did my salary. I started to notice, despite every promotion, we were still unable to save any money, as Amanda would find new opportunities to spend every dime I got. Then came her third year in law school, and she announced she was pregnant once again. 8 months later, our son Jake was born. Now I was responsible for caring for a newborn, a 3-year-old toddler, and a wife focusing on law school finals and then taking the bar. The times were countless that I held my temper as Amanda or her mother would gripe about something. Still, I knew how important it was for Amanda to realize her dream, so I sucked it up and continued to try to be her support. She spent time with her study group. A couple of times I would briefly join them when they went to blow off steam at some bar. I would leave early so I could tend to the babies and allow Amanda some me time. My goals didn't match the approval of some of the testosterone-driven male study partners, as they would ridicule me in front of Amanda. I was ready to beat the ever-loving crap out of them, but I knew that would impact negatively on Amanda, so I swallowed my pride and pretended I didn't hear or realize I was the butt of their jokes. Finally, the day arrived when finals were over, and my Amanda wound up being number 3 in her class. I felt pride as she marched across the stage at graduation while I held our children. She was glowing as she introduced me to countless classmates and then left me to attend a graduation party. She didn't come home until 10 the next morning, explaining that she had crashed at her friend's house after she had overdone it. I argued that she should have called me to pick her up, which led to much yelling, causing our children to start crying. I spent the next couple of hours calming them down, then decided to let it slide since the damage was already done. Why upset the children again? If I thought law school was intense, then studying for the bar was sheer hell. Amanda and her study partners ate, lived, and breathed the law 247 for 4 months, preparing for the 3-day ordeal. Again, I did what I could to support her, from foot massages to going on midnight ice cream runs. Amanda came through in flying colors with the top grade on the bar exam. Amanda had no trouble landing a high-paying corporate job in Dallas, so we moved. I thought I would start my MBA at SMU. I was quickly informed that I would have to put that idea on hold. Amanda argued that we needed to start out with as much money as we could while she worked to make partner in her firm. She said if I could hold off till then, she would support me in getting my MBA. She convinced me it was necessary for us to have a 2-income family so we could start our nest egg. So I found a brokerage firm in Dallas and began working for them. I soon found out that Amanda subscribed to the Joseph Stalin philosophy that what was hers, and what was mine was negotiable. I was responsible for paying the rent, our cars, the household budget, our student loans, and every other expense under the sun. Amanda was responsible for Amanda. Every attempt I made to account for her salary resulted in a screaming fit from her. I never found out where her salary went. We stayed a decade in Dallas before corporate headquarters transferred Amanda to Seattle. I suggested we fix up my grandmother's house, which I did inherit after she died. Amanda refused, claiming the dilapidated house looked like the Addams family mansion. I explained that the Victorian mansion could easily be fixed to her satisfaction for the amount she wanted to spend. I think a lot of it was she still felt insulted by my grandmother's demand for a prenuptial. Instead, Amanda found a house with an expensive price tag and a repressive homeowners association. I begged her to reconsider, but she had her mind made up. Against my wishes, I found myself signing paperwork to purchase a house I didn't like in a neighborhood I didn't like, paying for a country club membership I didn't like. Once again, I changed jobs in a brokerage firm where I was the low man on the totem pole. I continued to scrape by, barely able to cover our expenses from month to month. The friction was causing stress in our marriage as she began to denigrate me in front of the children. The final straw was when the house started breaking down, and the homeowners association insisted on me making expensive repairs I couldn't cover. I dreaded going to Amanda, but I was on the razor's edge. My last job review stated I had reached my plateau in earning capacity. In other words, I was stuck in my job with no hope of advancement. I sat down with Amanda and once again tried to explain our precarious situation. I showed her my job review, even though it shamed me. Again, she sneered, declaring her mother had been right about me all along. I sat defeated at the table as she got up and left. The next day, she told me she had a solution. Her company needed someone to go to their Boston office and run it until further notice. The scuttlebutt was that whoever got the assignment was the favorite to be the next partner in the firm. She and the children would stay with her mom while I remained down here to clean up the mess I made. Even I could manage to do something right if I had a head start. I held back from unleashing on her. I was sad to see the children weren't overly upset with the notion of being separated from me. Mostly, they seemed excited about moving to Boston to be spoiled by their grandmother. For me, the departure at the airport broke my heart, but the three of them were eager to leave. I went back home and cried. The next day, I made an appointment with the Homeowners Association Board to discuss my plan to repair the house to their standards. They rejected my plan outright and placed a series of draconian terms I would be forced to comply with. I would have to sacrifice to make everything work. Even with the temporary relief from my family leaving, I was still just managing to tread water financially. I began with the simple jobs that didn't take much knowledge or skill and completed them first. Then I started on the more complex jobs. It seemed for every job I completed, two new ones erupted, and I began to despise the money pit I lived in. I could only occasionally get my family on the phone, and when I did, they would terminate the call as quickly as they could. I began to drink heavily. That was frowned upon at my office, but by this time I didn't give a damn. The months passed until the winter holidays got close. I called to ask Amanda to come home so I could be with my family. She told me that wasn't possible due to her work schedule. Then I suggested flying up there. She told me my priority was to fix the house, not spend money on a vacation. Besides, Amanda intimated that her family would be away for Christmas, so there was no need to come up. She handed the phone off to Lily, who told me the family was gathering at her grandmother's, and she was so excited to see her cousins. Then Jake got on the phone and told me his uncle was taking him to the Patriots game at Gillette Stadium on Christmas. Something wasn't adding up, and I finally had my fill of the situation. I decided I would go to Boston. I certainly found the answers to questions I never thought of before, such as how easily I was replaced. The worst answer was when Lily turned 18. I had tried in vain to contact her and Jake after my trip to Boston a number of times, leaving countless voice messages begging them to call me. They never did return my calls. 2 weeks after Lily's birthday, I got a large manila envelope in the mail. Lily had filed in Suffolk County to change her name from Lily Green to Lily Roberts. Her reasoning was she wanted the name of her biological father, Mark J. Roberts. Attached were affidavits from Lily and Mark Roberts, which alleged they had begun an intimate relationship in college through law school, resulting in the birth of their daughter. This was confirmed by notarized DNA results from 3 reputable labs. Included was the file-stamped copy of the judge's order granting the name change. Right then, I knew that when Jake turned 18, I would get a similar surprise. Then I got the call from Amanda. She asked if I had received a package in the mail, and I told her I had. She explained that copy was supposed to go to her mother, but due to a secretary's mistake, it had been addressed to me. She assured me that the secretary had been terminated for making the mistake. No, Amanda, I'm the one who's been making mistakes. The problem is I've been making them for more than 20 years. I hung up the phone, and soon after that, I got served the divorce papers. Despite her having the higher-paying job, she insisted I wasn't entitled to an equitable division of the marital assets. What was hers, and what was mine, except for that money pit called the house. Even though she never paid a penny on the house, she expected to get 50 of that asset when it was sold. In other words, I would be out $200,000. I wonder how she reacted when she immediately received back the draconian property settlement agreement with my signature attached with no protest. I took time to refocus on the floors and realized I went on autopilot. The floors were sanded and buffed, ready for staining and varnishing. I was proud of the progress. Tomorrow would see the stain job completed, and midweek I would start adding several coats of varnish to protect the stain. The stain I selected would look good against the different hues of pastel I painted the various rooms. I twisted off the cap of the first long neck of the day and wandered around all the rooms, discovering minor things that still needed to be addressed, but all were simple and could be done easily. What I needed was another big project to take up time. I continued to look around, weighing options. I found myself out on the master bedroom balcony, looking at the sprawling backyard. Suddenly it came to me, a large swimming pool with an adjoining hot tub, perhaps a pool house. I smiled at the research I would have to do and what permits I would need. With any luck, the backyard project would take the entire summer. I visualized different sizes and styles of pools and guessed at the prospective costs. Soon, I started hearing the sound of a tortured motor and people yelling. Since they weren't visible from the back, I went to a bedroom facing the front street. I looked down to see a large U-Haul rental truck with a trailer attached, trying to back into the driveway of the house next door. The driver had the trailer jackknifed into the rain-soaked yard and was just spinning the wheels deeper into the lawn. I hurried outside and tapped on the driver's window, startling her. She turned and looked at me in surprise, even as harried as she was, dealing with 2 young children in the passenger seat yelling. She was a knockdown, gorgeous blonde and crying. I asked if she needed help, and the look of relief warmed my heart as she tearfully nodded. I opened the door and gave her my umbrella. She scurried over to the passenger door, unbuckled the children, and led them to the cover of the front porch. I got into the driver's seat, straightened out the wheels, and put it into low gear. I eased on the gas pedal so the rear wheels wouldn't spin and slowly inched forward to get out of the rut she had dug. To do that, I had to tear up more of her front yard, but it was the easiest solution. Soon I had the truck and trailer back on the street, ready for another attempt. Most people have never had to drive a vehicle hauling a trailer. The secret to reversing with a trailer is you have to turn opposite the way you would normally reverse. Slowly, I negotiated the trailer up the drive until both the trailer and truck were in the driveway, ready to be unloaded. I turned off the vehicle and ran hunched over from the rain to the porch. The kids were applauding, and a big grin was now on the blonde angel. I decided right then that I enjoyed her more grinning than crying. Here are the keys. I handed them over to her. Thank you so much for helping us. I don't know what I was going to do. Damn, she even had the sweetest southern drawl possible. Always glad to help out a neighbor. I'm Adam Green. I assume you are my new neighbors? Oh, forgive my rudeness. I'm Sarah Foster, and these 2 monsters are Mike and Emily. The description brought on a stream of protest from the children as they clutched their mother, trying to make her stop. I grinned at the shenanigans as the crisis passed and all could relax. I told her, "I hope you have help coming to unload because I can tell the truck and trailer are weighed down." A look of sadness crossed her face. "No, I had help loading, but it's just the three of us unloading here. Let me help, and if it gets too bad, I can call some people over." I was rewarded with another look of gratitude as she thanked me. I suggested I would do what unloading I could by myself, and then we would figure things out. The three disappeared into their house, and cries of disappointment erupted from inside. I went into the dimly lit front room. Sarah was upset as she told me the power was supposed to be on. I told her to hold on and went outside to call a buddy that worked for the power company. I gave him the address, and he said he remembered that particular job for installing the meter, but no one was home, so, under company policy, he had left. He was scheduled to return Monday afternoon to try again. Well, they're here now, and it's a lady with 2 small kids. You owe me some favors, so get over here, install the meter, and then get creative with the paperwork. He agreed to come out, and I hung up. I went back and told Sarah the power would be on soon. She thanked me, and again the kids burst into applause. With that, I unlocked the trailer and began hauling boxes into the front room. Sarah helped carry smaller, lighter boxes while the children watched from the porch. They were so cute as they argued over who would get to sleep in their room first. Sarah gave me a sardonic grin as she noticed me observing the children. I reminded her to leave the heavy boxes to me. I took a large box from her and carried it inside. Just as we finished unloading the trailer, my friend Joe drove up in his company utility truck. In a few minutes, lights came on throughout the house. This energized the kids, and they began running from room to room, exploring. Joe went back to his truck to get the paperwork for Sarah to sign. "So, Adam, you got everything unloaded?" Joe asked. I replied, "Joe, we're still working on the trailer and haven't started on the truck yet." Without saying anything else, Joe walked to the trailer, picked up a box, and started carrying it inside. That gave me the idea to make several calls. I told Sarah and Joe to take a break. We sat there getting acquainted. Sarah told us she was an elementary school teacher. Before I could ask how she could afford a house in the neighborhood, the cavalry arrived. Friends with wives and kids started arriving, bringing pizzas, beer for the adults, and soda for the kids. Most importantly, they brought strongbacks. A whirlwind of activity ensued as the truck got unloaded. My friends' wives were given a tour of the house. An army of kids chased each other throughout, and decorating strategy was discussed nonstop. Boxes were opened and contents taken to the proper rooms. Furniture was unloaded and bedroom sets assembled in the proper rooms. The living room was decorated, signaling the end of the truck unloading. Then it was a matter of just relaxing and visiting with friends. I was impressed how easily Sarah adapted to hosting an impromptu party with people she had just met. I realized her warm manners were quickly making her friends as phone numbers were shared and lunch dates were made among the women. Joe leaned toward me, nudged me with his beer bottle, and whispered, "You know the common denominator between all these ladies is you. Get ready for your ears to be burning." I laughed and told him about my idea for a pool. We started throwing out ideas, and more guys chimed in with opinions. There I was with the guys talking and Sarah talking to the girls. Every now and then, we would steal a glance at each other and smile. Slowly, the party broke up and all the guests left. Sarah allowed me to carry the slumbering kids upstairs to their beds. She tucked them in and kissed her sleeping angels goodnight. Wordlessly, we went downstairs and outside to sit on the front steps. I offered her a beer, and she shook her head no. So I twisted the cap off the icy long neck and took a deep swallow. We continued just to sit, relaxing. "Adam, you are my hero. Thank you so much for all you've done for us." "Sarah, I'm just being neighborly. There's no need to thank me." "Nonsense," she insisted. "If it wasn't for you, I'd still be stuck in my front yard with 2 crying kids and no power. I owe you big time, mister." I laughed and said, "Wait till you get to know me." I took another swig. Speaking of the truck, What are you going to do with it?" An anguished look appeared on Sarah's face as she related the horror story of driving cross-country in the truck. She had countless irate drivers honk at her when she was forced to stop for gas, food, or potty breaks. Her unfamiliarity with driving a truck caused traffic jams at gas stations, fast food places, and motels. Usually, she suffered humiliations and profanities hurled at her until she somehow solved her dilemma. "And now I have to return the truck cross-country," she cried, explaining the U-Haul store insisted she return it to their location. I placed my hand on her shoulder and reassured her. "Sarah, I'll take care of returning the truck." She looked at me in shock. "Adam, I can't let you do that." "Sarah, you can't subject your kids to another trip like that. I can take care of this. Don't worry about the truck. It's not like I'm going to steal it, and you know where I live." She argued for another couple of hours until my logic finally won out. She gave me all the rental papers and asked when I would leave. I told her around 9:00 a.m. She said if I was leaving that early, maybe we ought to call it a night. As we stood up, she gave me an impulsive hug and kissed me on the cheek. "Good night." She was inside before I could react. I had a warm glow as I walked home. The next morning, I knocked on Sarah's door. She opened it, and I was beset with twin typhoons hugging my legs, calling me Mr. Adam. I laughed, picked them both up, and carried them inside. Sarah nervously handed me the keys and an envelope full of 20 bills. She explained it was for gas money and a bus ticket back home. "Adam, please be careful," she told me as I fired up the truck and backed the trailer down the drive. "When will you be back?" she asked. I smiled. "Sooner than you think." I drove toward the interstate, and right before I got to the on-ramp, I turned into the local U-Haul store. I walked inside and saw the person I wanted to deal with. "Hi, Adam. What's up?" The store manager shook my hand. "Hi, Perry. I'm returning a truck for a friend." I handed him the paperwork, and he studied it. "Adam, this says it was supposed to be a round-trip rental. The truck and trailer are due back there." "Well, Perry, things have changed, and this needs to be a one-way rental. I'll pay whatever extra is due for changing the terms." "Okay, let me clear this with the originating store." While I waited, I noticed Perry engaged in an escalating conversation. Finally, he yelled he would damn well accept delivery of the trailer and truck and slammed the phone down. He walked to me and said, "Not a word from you, Adam." I just smiled and handed him the keys as he inspected the truck, then a credit card to cover the change from a round-trip rental to a one-way. He handed me a receipt, and I thanked him, violating his order. Then I called a taxi. 30 minutes later, I got out in front of my house. As luck would have it, Mike and Emily were playing outside. Once they saw me, cries of "Mr. Adam" filled the air. A grimy Sarah came outside to investigate, her eyes widening in surprise. "What happened? Please don't tell me you had an accident." I laughed and told her I was back from dropping off the truck and trailer at the local U-Haul store. She frowned. "But back home they told me I had to contract it for a round trip. They wouldn't let me have it unless I returned it. Sarah, when I talked to the local U-Haul manager, he called them and explained the change in circumstances and got them to agree to allow him to accept the delivery of the truck." Okay, it was a lie, but it didn't hurt anyone except the jerks that rented the truck. It solved a problem. At any rate, Sarah smiled as I gave her the receipt, signifying the transaction was complete. "Looks like you're having fun." I indicated her dirty clothes. She told me she underestimated the complexities of the house. I told her if it got too bad to come over and get me and I'd help her out. I then gave back the envelope of cash she had given me that morning and walked back to my house. Despite losing half the morning, I soon had the entire second-floor stain applied and started on the first floor. The therapeutic release it gave me was now counterbalanced by thinking of the enticing blonde next door. I realized I was humming as I applied the stain. It had been a long time since I felt like humming. A knock on the door ended my humming, and I opened it to an anxious Sarah. "I have a plumbing emergency. There's water leaking under my toilet. Can you help me? Let me grab some tools, and I'll be right over, Sarah." I quickly gathered up the tools I suspected I would need and went next door. Mike and Emily were waiting for me at the door and shouted the arrival of Mr. Adam to the world. They led me upstairs to the master bedroom, where I found Sarah in the bathroom, furiously wiping up water with a towel, wringing it into the sink. Setting my tools down, I knelt and turned off the water at the valve. I then flushed the toilet to empty the tank and bowl, bringing another flood of water to leak out. I told Sarah I would handle it. She moved away, trying to remove the bra and panties hanging from the shower rod without me noticing. I pretended not to see her doing it as she stood in the doorway. From practice, I quickly had the tank disconnected from the water line and removed from the bowl. Then the bowl was off, and as I suspected, the wax ring had failed. I removed the remnants of the old wax ring and replaced it with a spare ring from my own renovations. All the while, I explained what I was doing to Sarah. I caulked around the bottom of the bowl and carefully placed the bowl on the flange. I pressed down on the bowl and told Sarah to sit on the toilet lid. She giggled as I told her that her weight would ensure the wax ring sealed properly as I moved around, screwing the bolts to the flange screws. I got the crazy idea of screwing her even after I was sure the ring had sealed. I kept her sitting despite the awkward positions. Finally, I had to tell her to get up so I could reattach the tank. Soon, it was bolted on, and I turned the water back on and did a test flush. There was no rush of water, and Sarah yelled victory. I finished with another bead of caulk around the bottom. After that, it was just a matter of mopping and cleaning up. She moved to hug me, but I indicated my soaked clothes. "Let me wash them," she cried. I reminded her I would be running around naked, and she blushed. She said she would like to treat me to a meal, but without her car, she hadn't had a chance to shop for groceries. She and the kids were surviving on delivery food. I told her if she liked, I would go home, shower, and take them out for supper. She was concerned they were imposing on me too much. I told her not to think that, and I would be there at 6:00 p.m. at 6:00 p.m. I pulled into their garage, and they came out. Sarah expressed surprise that I had bought 2 booster seats for Mike and Emily. We got the kids situated, and I took them to a nice Italian restaurant. I continued to get acquainted with my new neighbors as Mike and Emily took turns telling me things. Sarah just sat and smiled as her 2 darlings ingrained themselves into my heart. A couple of times they divulged personal information, causing Sarah to blush and quickly steer the conversation in another direction. After the meal, I took them for ice cream at a place with a children's play area. We watched as they played. The sheer look of love on Sarah's face as she watched her children was the look artists have tried to capture since the dawn of civilization. She noticed my staring at her and diverted her attention back to me. "So you like me, Sarah Foster?" I teased. She immediately blushed. My God, I wanted to sink into the earth when Mike blurted that out. From that point, our conversation segued into various topics, including why Sarah didn't have her car. She explained her brother, an engineer, would be returning from duty overseas and driving her car to them. Until then, they would be renting a car starting tomorrow. "Nonsense, just borrow mine," I said. "I rarely drive it anyway, since I'm usually in my truck." Again, we argued until I convinced her borrowing my car was the cheapest and easiest solution. When we started home, the kids drifted to sleep almost immediately, worn out from their exertions. On the way, I pointed out the various controls and features of the car to Sarah as she quietly took it all in. I parked in her driveway and gathered Mike in my arms as Sarah unlocked the house. I put him on the bed and Sarah tucked him in. I went and got Emily and Sarah was waiting. I put her to bed and once again she fussed over her. I realized I missed that part of raising a family. The sadness must have been showing because Sarah had a worried look as she looked at me. I tried to assure her I was okay, but I think she knew differently. As I placed my car keys in her hand, she gently touched my cheek with her other hand and, raising up on tiptoes, gave me a soft goodnight kiss. I couldn't be sure, but I think I levitated all the way back to my home. Monday found me back at my job, but I couldn't concentrate thinking about Sarah. I turned off my computer and began doing various odd jobs around the house, including finishing the staining of the first floor. So in that way it was a good day as the number of house projects continued to dwindle. It wasn't that I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I was quickly approaching the tunnel nonetheless. I heard voices calling for Mr. Adam before the knock on the door. I grinned as I opened the door. "Mr. Adam, come eat with us," the kids chimed as Sarah invited me to their first home-cooked meal. I asked for 15 minutes for a quick shower, and she said they would be waiting. When I arrived, the dining room table was filled with fried chicken, southern fried potatoes, biscuits and gravy, corn, and black-eyed peas. The scent of a warm apple pie also announced its presence. Both kids argued they wanted to sit by me, and Sarah said the only way to solve that was for me to sit at the head of the table. The kids sat on either side of me, and Sarah sat opposite. The kids said grace, and then we all buried ourselves in the meal. I stuffed myself with the fabulous food and groaned as a slice of apple pie a la mode appeared for me. Somehow I finished every delicious morsel. Then I was drafted to play various children's games for the rest of the evening. 9:00 p.m. came, and the children trudged off to bed with Sarah following. Halfway up, she stopped and invited me upstairs. I went up and read a bedtime story to Mike while Sarah did the same for Emily. As they slept, we sneaked downstairs and Sarah put on a pot of coffee. As it brewed, we cleaned up from the meal and soon had everything in order. She poured a large ceramic mug full for me and asked how I took it. When I told her black, she wrinkled her nose as she poured cream into hers. She handed me the mug and we walked outside to the porch swing. It was an unseasonably agreeable February night. As we sipped the steaming coffee, we started talking about Mike and Emily. Before I knew it, I was telling her about Lily and Jake. Then the floodgates spilled open as I told her about the flaming wreck my family and life were. When I finished, Sarah's eyes pooled with tears of sympathy, and she placed her head on my torso, consoling me. It was pleasant to have someone empathize with what I had been going through. Then, in a quiet, soft voice, she told me what brought her and the children cross-country. She had lived an ideal childhood, was the homecoming queen, and married her childhood boyfriend. They went off to college, got their degrees, and then began raising their family. Somewhere along the line, the train ran off the tracks. They began to argue, mostly about his flirtations with other women. The flirtations escalated to full-blown affairs, and the arguments became physical. Luckily, the children were too young to understand the drama. The word figured more and more into Sarah and her husband's conversations when they were talking. Then came the fateful call one night from the police. A young woman driver had been killed in a one-car accident. Thrown out of the wreckage was her deceased husband. From all indications, they were involved in a sexual act at the time of the accident. From that point, a hellish existence of dealing with the situation ensued. Her in-laws blamed Sarah, the dead girl's family blamed Sarah, and to a certain point, Sarah blamed Sarah. The estate slowly moved through probate as the in-laws' legal maneuvers ate into her late husband's assets. Then the dead girl's family filed a lawsuit, and Sarah was forced to countersue. Somehow she waded through the gauntlet, and when all the dust settled, she decided on a clean break. She researched all regions of the country to relocate, and karma led her to my neighborhood. She used all her money to purchase her house, and now all she had left was the promise of a job in the school district and an underperforming hedge fund account she would have to dip into to cover expenses until she started her job. One thing she hadn't counted on was the house repairs, which also ate away at her savings. Through it all, she still had no regrets for moving here. We sat silently, contemplating as the swing slowly swayed. Then I told her I wanted to look at her hedge fund account. I was sure I could get her stock portfolio back on a successful track. She got up, went inside, and returned with a file. I took the papers and told her I would look at them overnight. She told me to keep them and bring them back tomorrow night at supper. Then she gave me another goodnight kiss. As soon as I got home, I started studying her hedge fund account and became aware of all the unethical ways the manager used to enrich himself. Not only was he a crook, but he was an incompetent one based on his stock selection. I had no doubt I could effect a 30 positive change in her account in the first year alone. I began redlining things to point out to Sarah tomorrow and went to bed still thinking about her kiss. Supper time found me at Sarah's for another tasty meal followed by more children's games and bedtime readings. This time I read Emily to sleep, tucked her in and told her good night. The night was colder and precluded being outside, and I needed the table to spread out my analysis spreadsheets and projections for Sarah. I had it all laid out as she came downstairs, started another pot of coffee, and asked what I found out. I told her she was being cheated and I could help her as I began to explain in detail. She started walking into the den. I asked what was wrong. She replied nothing was wrong, that she trusted me, and there was no need to explain. She wanted me to come into the den and relax. I followed her and we sat and talked into the night. As the fire died out in the fireplace, I realized despite the age difference, I was much more comfortable with Sarah than I had been with Amanda. As we kissed goodnight, I left with her signature authorizing me to take over her stock account and a standing invitation to supper. As soon as I woke up, I began to get Sarah's financial situation stabilized. I called her former broker, told him he was fired, and I was handling the account. He started getting disagreeable until I mentioned perhaps I needed to call the SEC. Those magic words brought an entire change in attitude, and I got him to agree to reimburse Sarah every fee he had charged, to the tune of $5,000. Within minutes, I had electronic confirmation of the change in her account. Not bad for 10 minutes of work. I began to restructure her portfolio, dumping some real loser stocks and reinvesting in blue-chip stocks. The remainder I put into aggressive volatile stocks, which would require constant monitoring, but if handled properly, would give her a great return. Even better, I wouldn't charge her a broker fee on any transactions. By the end of the day's trading, I was pleased with my performance. I went next door for supper with a happy heart. When I began to broach the subject to Sarah, she stopped me and told me she trusted me, and I didn't need to worry about giving a daily account. So I continued trading on her account and seeing her every night. Weekends were spent showing her and the kids around the city instead of home projects. Well, that wasn't entirely correct. I was helping Sarah at her house. Her house was in the same state of disrepair as mine had been, so my expertise came in handy. We would discuss a problem, I would offer solutions, and Sarah would decide. Sarah also decided the pace of our relationship. Our goodnight kiss soon became makeout sessions once the kids were asleep. She only allowed me to get to second base because she felt uncomfortable doing anything while the kids were upstairs. Just holding that wonderful body next to mine was enough, even if I went home every night with blue balls. Then Sarah's brother Ray and his family arrived with her car. We grilled steaks as he and I got acquainted. I could tell Sarah would be asking him what he thought of me, and I wanted it to be an honest opinion. So I didn't try any pretense. Ray, I'm just going to put this out there for you. I'm in love with Sarah, and I intend to marry her whenever she's ready. She's been through enough crap in her life, and I want to make sure she never has to go through that again. Ray shook my hand and thanked me for my honesty. I'm glad you were upfront with me. She's been so happy since she moved here and met you. I think that would be a good thing for all of you. With that seal of approval, I felt like a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Soon I would be helping Sarah pack and head out for the trip back. She made a special effort to let me know she trusted me, leaving me with a lingering kiss and sweet caresses. I wanted to take her right there, but knew she would feel uncomfortable. When Sarah got back, she thanked me for helping out, and Ray had given her his seal of approval. The following weekend, Sarah took the kids to her parents for a visit. That meant I had the entire weekend to myself, and I started back on my house projects. I sanded, stained, and varnished the basement stairs, then sanded, stained, and varnished the balcony railing and banisters in the master bedroom. Finally, I hung the crown molding and track lighting in the basement. The next big job would be to replace the windows on the first floor with more energy-efficient ones. I already got the energy company to give me a rebate to help cover the costs. As I was deep into my research, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find two large men dressed in black suits holding badges. "Are you Adam Green?" "Yes, I'm Adam Green. We're with the SEC. We need to talk with you." I was taken aback. Then I saw the business card of Sarah's former hedge fund manager they were holding. Oh hell, come on in. For the next 2 hours, the two grilled me and reviewed all my correspondence and transactions with the hedge fund. After everything was said and done, they apologized for the intrusion and told me to call if I ever got any more unusual solicitations. Oh hell yes, I'll call if I get any. Sarah called to tell me she had gotten back and wanted to see me. I went over to her house and hugged her and the kids. We had supper, and Sarah sent the kids to bed early. We went to the den and sat on the sofa. She began telling me about her visit and how everyone there liked me. Then she asked if anything had happened to me. I told her the SEC had visited me, and she turned pale. I related everything that had happened. Sarah, you need to tell me the whole story about your hedge fund manager and why the SEC is investigating him. She tearfully told me everything and kept apologizing. I held her and kissed her as she shook, telling her it wasn't her fault. But we both realized she needed to find another broker to handle her investments, as my past association with her former broker would raise red flags with the SEC. The kids were sad to see me leave the next morning. As I kissed Sarah goodbye, I promised we would have the best Christmas ever. As I walked home, I realized I would have to start work on my grandmother's mansion. Thanks for watching. How do you think Adam should handle his renewed relationship with his children and his growing bond with Sarah? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. See you in the next video.